Welcome, worldographers and world builders alike, to episode 16 of the World Hammer, where I read lore from across the multiverse and perhaps yours. All the entries seen here are submitted by talented writers from our Atovia Discord community, based on a daily prompt project called Build Together and tagged for World Hammer. If you would like your own works read aloud, you are not only welcome, but encouraged to join our Discord and submit your own. The link can always be found in the description. Now back to the Forge to see what's been built. For day 516, the prompt was, what's an endangered/minor species of importance? And this comes from Nukes in the Discord. Nugget writes, Weavers, an entry in Prometheus Society.
Right. How do I start this one? Prometheus is dead. Nothing is forever. Even the gods die of old age eventually, and their magic falls to the worlds they've created. But they are not the only thing out there. Weavers live in between dimensions, just like gods do, but they are not gods. They are parasites. They feed on the magic of the gods and their creations and can weave and alter the threads of the realities they infiltrate. When a god dies, they flock to the corpse and abandon reality like divine decomposers. They get stuck in the reality created by the god and feed on the magic that is left behind. Weavers are very powerful and extremely hard to kill. They have something of a unique gimmick of being able to switch bodies, usually to avoid magic corrosion. When their current host begins getting too worn out from magic corrosion, they find a new person to take over. Over the course of the next several years, the Weaver will consume the soul of their new host, merging it with the rest of their being. Their memories will merge, and eventually you will not be able to tell where one ends and the other begins. They will continue to live like this until their new body begins to break away from corrosion and they begin again. It would not be inaccurate to say that a Weaver is the combination of every soul that they have digested. This same cycle continues until one of two things happens. Either they cannot find a suitable new host, which is unlikely. Chances are, if one gets stuck in such a position, they instead attach to an object to save energy until they find something better, or they starve. Which is actually how they die most often. Other, stronger weavers eat everything in the area. Weaker ones cannot find enough and starve. The combined magic of their compounded souls bleeds back out into the world and is fed on by yet more weavers. And then, the weakest of them starve and die and are consumed by other weavers. So on and so forth until all magic from the reality is gone and consumed, and only one weaver remains and will be able to become God themselves by the amount of magic they have consumed. So on and so forth. In this day and age, there are only a few weavers left in existence, possibly even single digits by now. They continue to be motivated by food and often strike deals with humans, giving them parts of their power in exchange for sources of sustenance. The two most well-fed and, as such, most powerful weavers are the Archivist and the Father of Monsters. There is a large gap that's then followed by the Reflection and the Harbinger before another steep drop-off, and where we get to the questionably all-there ones of the Mold, the Post, and the Timekeeper. There are more out there, I'm sure. It's hard to keep track, after all. They still look humanoid, and there's no telling when one dies. Those are just the ones the Prometheus Society is keeping tabs on right now. But whenever another shows up, they'll be tracking them, and their followers as well. They'll need as many of them as they can for what they plan to do.
I think Weavers are kind of like those who hold power a little bit, like wielders of power anyway, in this Prometheus sort of AU setup that Nugget has. I'm curious exactly what makes someone a weaver. How does someone become one? And maybe that's not something to be revealed yet. I'd be interested to know. The Wanderer writes, Giants, the last heirs of the Titans, an entry in Endrin. Giants in Endrin used to be, perhaps, one of the most powerful races in Endrin. They were the children of the Titans, smaller than their divine ancestry. But even the smaller ones are at least 15 to 20 feet tall, with the larger ones reaching heights as great as 36 feet in height. Not only this, but their thick hides could withstand the northern colds far greater than many of the other races. They built great cities of stone, formed massive farms that would not be wilted by famine, brewed enough ale to fill lakes, and their mastery of magic was very little matched except save the elves and the Shalantians. Moreover, During the Old World, they were one of the only ones able to provide protection comparable to the elves. They were a wise and proud species. Their poetry, stories, and art was renowned. Moreover, they also served a vital role, especially in the Middle World. An agreement was reached, and races were much more common among each other. The giants would build great roads, canals, and irrigation, both for themselves and others, turning massive portions of the great hall that is Endrin into fertile lands. They would also make windbreakers with windmills, giving wind-powered machinery to all around them. In places governed by the giants, there was a great peace and safety. However, they would not be written of here if they did not befall misfortune. And it hit them, their war with the Kalor, a primordial race like the Titans, and the war was a bitter one. The Kalor began losing, and as they began to lose their ancient cities, they devised a plan. They prepared a great and terrible weapon, a horrifying curse, and they smote the giants with it. There were 9 great houses of the giants, and their curse smote and buried itself into 7 of them. The spell, as the remaining giants put it, severed them from their own mind. In human terms, they were genetically lobotomized. While they could still move and speak, even simple concepts were difficult for them to grasp. The same minds that could once recite hours of poetry and build great cathedrals couldn't keep track of the days, had next to no problem-solving skills, and as tragic, had no idea what happened to them save that they were lacking something instinctual. What was worse yet was that the children born of these giants had the same curse. It lingered from generation to generation. While the remaining 3 houses both won the war and took a watchful care over their diminished kin, a near mortal blow was dealt to the giant race. With 6/9 of their population effectively gone, they retreated their borders, keeping up what they could, but lacking the numbers to sustain mass swaths of their infrastructure. And while they did their best to keep peace and harmony, many of their sundered kin lacked the wherewithal to refrain from slaying the smaller folk on accident, being utterly unaware of their own strength. This caused the giants to retreat further still to keep the small ones safe, and they put effort into keeping their sundered kin from harming them, but many ran loose, got lost, and knew not where to find their homes. As a result, very many giants, unhomed and ungardened, grew quite wild, growing smaller and smaller with their malnutrition over the generations, able, perhaps, to reach their former sizes, but unable to sustain the food for them. As for the 3 houses who managed to resist the cruel curse, they were faced with a sudden truth. While it would take ages, eventually they would face the issue of inbreeding. So they slowed their reproduction to a near halt, having scarce options for mates, and even then, as thousands of years passed by, infertility began to slowly rise each generation. In their knowledge, they knew full well that the giant race will eventually fade out of existence. As for the smaller races, without the great size, strength, and skill of the giants, the infrastructure slowly faded, and with it a great famine began to hit. While the elves alleviated as much as they could not feed near the entire world alone, and while they managed to nurse the young fledgling races back to health, enough was lost that it never recovered. I like stories in world building that leave you wondering if there would have been a time in which the world could have shifted into long-term general prosperity if it weren't for the actions of one group or weren't for the failings of one group. And this is one of those stories where, even though this group is perhaps minor now, they clearly played a very major part in the sort of sustaining of a large portion of Endrin until that eventually was gone. Bulbman 5000 writes, An Endangered Wonder. The octi family, the cephalopod wonders. Octi are a unique species of creature on Seroth. Octi are a unique species of strange cephalopods that carry a wide variety of fungal growths on their bodies along a special membrane on their heads that allows the fungi to grow without harming the octi. These creatures were observed for decades, yet many questions remained until more recently with the conservation efforts done by the Fungora. The octi family measure at roughly 4.5 feet in height, 18 feet across, accounting for arm length, and weighing roughly 280 pounds on average. Technically speaking, members of the octi family aren't actually very biologically related. The greatest difference is what fungus type grows on their hides, giving the octi the strangest ability for one member to become an octi of a different group in very choice circumstances. The current known octi are as follows: Kaga octi and Blura octi, seen in drylands near caves; Vetas octai and Hona octai seen in fields near trees and caves, Loeta octai, Onra octai, and Baena octai seen in dense forests and jungles, Mulga octai and Nuka octai seen in marshlands. It was discovered by the Fungora why the octai evolved to grow these fungal species on their backs. It's a symbiotic relationship. The octi and fungus are actually more connected than originally thought. The octi provide nutrients to the fungus, and the fungus acts as extrasensory organs for the octi. Though the exact mechanism is unknown, it is why these creatures have survived the Age of Scourge for as long as they have. Unfortunately, they have long been rendered endangered due to Scourge incursions and the Carver's rampages, making the octi a protected species in the Naren alliance with the Fungora home nation. Some of the behaviors of the octi family have also confused scientists for decades. After observing Fungora, scientists discovered that alongside their beak, they also have a surprisingly large and rough tongue, which they apparently use to lick mineral deposits to presumably fill gaps in their diet. Studies also found that they aren't actually carnivores, but opportunistic omnivores. But most amusing for many is their behavior towards the scourge. From brutalizing smaller monsters with their strong tentacles to using a loud squeal noise they can produce to distract monsters, allowing others to flee, to one occasion where the Stalker, one of the servants of the Grim Patriarch, was preparing a siege on the Overgarden, the home nation of the Fungora. It never came, because the octi kept managing to distract the Stalker and dismantle his forces through sabotage, demonstrating the intelligence of the octi family and the surprising idiocy of the Stalker. To this day, some get a chuckle out of the story of the legendary woman hunter being completely humiliated. Good stuff. This had CC on it for constructive criticism, which all Bowman stuff does. This one, I'm just going to point out the last paragraph is the roughest here. Everything else reads pretty steady for the most part, but that last paragraph has some real roughness, especially in that like little interjection section. You really begin to lose the structure of the sentence. So definitely check that out again. Maybe look into why that feels so stumbly to read, but otherwise really fun stuff. Symbiotic relationships I think are really cool to kind of take from real life and attempt to incorporate your own ideas. Fungal species seem to do this a lot too. I mean, like lichen is not one thing. It's, I think, 2 or 3 different organisms working in tandem. Same thing with like moss and other stuff. Some really fascinating things in our world. It's fun to try and bring interesting and new ideas like that to our own. For day 517, the prompt was, what single person has taken the most lives in your world? Was the bloodshed deserved? This comes from Scrubsy Boy 844 in the Discord. EclipsEternal writes, The Cursed King, Calamity of Chaos, and Entry in Shattered Tale. The heroes aren't trying to achieve a good ending. They can only attempt to get the best possible ending. For the sake of prophecy shenanigans, I have designed 3 endings for Shattered Tale. More info per CC. Iris Knight is the canon vessel of Kamenos. He is the only person that can be the vessel of Kamenos. World anchors are locations of immense power that are directly connected to the Pantheon. Continuation. Shattered Tale suffers from natural in-world power creep. As time goes on, the people of the world grow more in tune with the gods. To reach this ending, Iris has to die before gaining the title of the Cursed King. The eventual vessel of Kamenos is dead, thus he cannot wreak havoc on the world. This sounds good, but this leaves the world to run unimpeded for thousands of years. As the people grow stronger, they destroy themselves. Wars rip the world apart as the people fight for control. Desolation. The Cursed King rises to power and begins his crusade. The world anchors start to fall as he gains power. In his wake, the world is left a desolate place. To reach this ending, the Cursed King needs to die without destroying all 16 anchors. With the world still connected to the Pantheon, the gods cannot rebuild it. The world is left mostly a desolate and barren land where nobody can live. The people slowly die out as the gods are left helpless. Decimation. The Cursed King succeeds. The world anchors are destroyed and he dies within them. As the vessel of Kamenos, this returns the god of chaos to the Pantheon. With no ties left to the Pantheon, the world is wiped and rebuilt as it once was 2,000 years ago, an empty slate to begin the cycle anew. In 1,000 years, the Great War will break out. In 100 years, the Demon Lord will be banished. In 400 years, the vessel of Kamenos will be born and banished. In 500 years, the vessel of Kamenos will return as the Cursed King and begin his crusade once more. So I like that you tried to give us more info based on the constructive criticism before, but I still feel lost when I read these. And it's a little bit hard to put into words, but I think there's just still a little bit too much lacking general context. It's good for us to know what these things are, which you did give us, but we're still lacking context, which is fine. The only reason I give this feedback is because it is asked for. I don't think we always need the context, especially for something like Worldhammer. It's okay for us to just get sneak peeks at what sometimes just feel like world builder notes. But if you want people to be able to really process this, it might require a little bit more front end writing, a little bit more providing us with, what is this Cursed King situation, this Iris individual, the relation of those two, and then the idea of the prophecies in the end of the world, so that we get a little bit more of the full picture. We don't need the full picture, but just a little more context that's wrapped around the actual meat of what you want to give us here, and then this stuff will parse a little bit more cleanly. Now, this person is new, and their name is very difficult to pronounce. I'm going to do my best the first try, and then after that, we might just call them Stablocci, if that is okay with this individual. If it is not, let me know, give me a guide if I do this wrong, but here we go. Stabloccinaucinihilipilification writes, Asmodeus, an entry in Moors //Vita. If sinners don't have lifespans, then why haven't I met a sinner older than you? Asked Alice. Asmodeus, replied Desperado. Is that the guy in Harmon's sword? Said Alice. Know anything else? Desperado questioned, and in response Alice shook her head. Surely you've heard stories of people being boiled in oil and poked with pitchforks. That was him. I've never seen it down here, so I just assumed it's just what people told their kids to stop them misbehaving. Hell was a different place before Asmodeus was killed, or should I say felled, by an army of 500 of the strongest demons. They eventually chopped Asmodeus into pieces and used them in weapons, and given to the 20 20? Interjected Alice. You know how Harmon's sword reflects any attack that hits it? That was just what Asmodeus' skin did. The other bits did other things as well. Their eyes made them damn near omnipotent. Their heart could slow down time. Weapons were made from them to make sure that Asmodeus never regains consciousness, considering that they're immortal, replied Desperado. How many did they kill? Themselves? Millions, at least, indirectly. Nearly every man, woman, and child sent to hell. Why? They claimed it was all in the name of divine punishment. They thought the wicked deserved to suffer. Damn, maybe they do, but all I know is that personality comes before the ideology, and Alice, that demon wanted to inflict pain. All right, I dig this introduction, sort of, here. Seems like we're in hell, maybe. I'm down for another setting in hell. I think that's a lot of fun. This conversation between the Desperado and Alice gave me a little bit of a Western vibe. I mean, with a name like Desperado. If these voices are way off, Stablocci, let me know, as well as with the name. I'm very open to my own constructive criticism. I want this stuff to be as good as possible. As for constructive criticism, honestly, this is written really well. I dig this. I think we could be served well with maybe just a little bit of set dressing. The tiniest, it could be 1 or 2 lines of standing somewhere or some kind of environmental cue. Could be just kind of a fun little extra interesting piece. The dialogue otherwise is really well written. There's a couple of stumbly spots here and there, but that would be easily fixed by just, one more look over things, I think. So not really worth me pointing anything out. But really like this. I'm excited to read some more. The Wanderer writes, Estragan, the Bandit Slayer, an entry in Endrin. During the late stages of the Middle World, Estragan was a nobleman whose daughter was killed in a bandit encounter. The bandits had meant to hold her for ransom, but she tried to escape and in the ensuing struggle was struck dead. They planned to send the ransom note anyways and ambush her father when he came with the ransom. What they didn't expect was for him to have prepared an ambush for them, and given he had well-equipped knights, the bandits were massacred easily. There he discovered his daughter was dead. Any mercy or compassion or tolerance for bandits died that day as well. He requested to the king to personally lead a hunt for bandits, and seeing that he was a nobleman who had commanded quite a few successful ventures in the past, his request was granted. So he set out to destroy every bandit he could find, and given his prowess in the art of war, he was successful. He captured dozens of bands of bandits across the nation, killing only those he needed to, fighting till they surrender, and when they were captured, he would take them to the nearest city or town and publicly execute them in the most painful ways he could think of, and as a very bitter man, his imagination knew little bounds. Without getting into many of his methods, the likes of which are far better lost to history than remembered, all I shall suffice to say was that there was quite a few inventions made initially exclusively for torment. Their deaths and subsequent display was encouraged to attend and see. He gave out free food to ensure a crowd, and in turn, these executions proved to become a sort of a festival, and the humanity of those slain was lost to spectacle. With less bandits, the kingdom got mildly richer. Estragon was made ruler save under the king alone. He took this widespread breadth of power to double down, expand his ventures. He even got tasked by other nations to rid them of their bandits. By the end of his life, bandits were closer to a fairy tale than a threat. The roads were quite safe from bandits, trade routes were unopposed, and farms were safe. At the time, he was hailed as a grand hero, a great vanquisher of evil. He directly ordered the death of over 20,000 bandits, and his decrees and influence killed perhaps 200,000, and after his death, perhaps millions. But with the lens of time, the question has to be asked, as horrible as nearly all bandits are, was a beyond agonizing death a deserved fate? What of the younger bandits? Some were beardless youths. He didn't spare any of them. I am but a herald, though. I have thoughts, of course, but will not override your own with mine. There lies the question for you. Was Estragon's reign one of peace or despair? P.S. Yeah, he might not have the highest kill count, considering old Shalantir and their rival empire were wiped out by one person. Kirith raged war against creation. Zyria killed hundreds of millions with her undead plague and whatnot, but not counting gods or apocalypses, Estragon has the greatest kill count. One thing that you didn't mention at the end here, the Wanderer, is that when you seek to destroy the symptom of a deeper problem in a country, you often do much more harm than good as well. If there are a lot of bandits, that means that there is an issue with the distribution of wealth, there is an issue with poverty, there's an issue with hunger, it could be a whole multitude of problems in the kingdom, and the problem itself might not be the banditry, but the economic encouragement to stoop to banditry because nothing else is working. And somebody who just goes around and kills all the bandits never fixes that problem. Now, inadvertently, it increases wealth because you remove people that would be thieving things, and you also remove a lot of people in general, but you never go deeper to the real issue, which is a common issue in politics in general. Bowman 5000 writes, Seroth, the Ancient Heroes and the Butcher's Emergence. Secrets of the Dark. The 8 champions stand before something they didn't expect in the Nexus of Darkness. A structure, towering and winding like a plant. A temple? A castle? No, they couldn't make sense of it from here, but they needed to reach the despoiler of darkness, so in they went. And immediately, they are caught off guard. Blue light springs to life in the darkness, the glass floor producing a sharp ting sound with every step they take. They feel as if they were maybe supposed to be here, like something wanted them in this place. The shine of a light catches their eyes. What is this? Nari says, her head tilted in confusion. As a shape appears amongst the glass, a humanoid figure with a clawed hand crouched down as it grips what seems like a woman. Or maybe slamming her into the ground, as it looks like something is erupting from where the woman is in the picture as words appear below it. When the patriarch Grimm tore the mother asunder, hate grew and pain rose, a siege upon all life. The heroes moved on, questions beginning to build in their minds. But then the images just kept appearing, telling a story. Figures of colored glass molded into shapes, all while the heroes moved on, climbing stairs and crossing bridges. Yet in deepest dark, lights did shine, human souls flying free, a hope refined. An image of a painter then appeared, the man holding a brush in one hand. A painter, his imagination flying free, a power awakened to make the darkness flee. Later, the silhouette of a woman appeared, and with it more of the story. A witch who knew of ancient power. Before this rule, she refused to cower. The heroes simply quietly read as they moved on. They knew not a single one there could stop from reading this. Was it curiosity? Was it this feeling like they had to witness this? They didn't know. Another imagine, another piece. Then a priest with prayers roared. He saw the others, his will soared. Another one, this time a man holding an axe. A warrior rose, his head held high. He knew in his soul war was nigh. The champions couldn't see the top. How far up even were they? Yet another image, yet this one different. They could see the human shape, but 7 hearts shine in the chest of the silhouette. And last was the fractured. At last was the fractured. With minds numerous and wills many, their sword shone like a lantern in the deepest night. Minds numerous and wills many? What does that even mean? Orvis mumbles as the champions stare at the silhouette. Yeah, that... We should keep going, Zara says as the group move on. The champions notice this tower has changed as they've gone up. The windows shine with an unknown light. The stairs twist like a screw as they climb. The bridges trace like veins as they walk, yet the story moves on despite the strangeness. These 5 humans did gather, 5 heroes in deepest dark. They faced the patriarch's hordes with hope, their final arc. The silhouette showed the 5 gathered together facing a horde of beasts. The next image showed the beasts depicted as shattered glass at their feet. The 5 heroes fought and killed, their kind in pieces at their feet, yet hope's glimmer was still faint. The patriarch's rule would not shatter so easily. The 8 champions move on. The war had lasted years, yet to them it felt like months. In the mother's world, hate's lesions had slowed, fear's talons retreated, if even for a time. The image showed the warriors together, charging forward at what looked like a distant castle. The champions, these 8 warriors, moved on, a want for answers gnawing at them. The hunter of women fell, his screeches warning of their might. The champions knew exactly what wretched bird the image showed the 5 standing over, the stalker. Zorn snickered at the idea that he really was always a screw-up in one way or another. The heroes fought with souls unbending, while evil's scheme seemed never-ending. The 5 heroes were shown now at the feet of the castle, shattered glass depicting the beasts they've slain. Yet as they stood tall before the patriarch's doorstep, as the legions of anguish he had sent had begun to wane in the mother's world, the image changed from the heroes standing before the castle to 2 giant eyes. His patience had run out. The image changed to them standing before the patriarch. For the first time, the champions had seen anything about how he actually looked. He towered over them. Tusks poked out from his mouth. The image made him look like he was wearing a robe. His hair was like giant mane. His hands, though, were the most striking detail. They were red. The Scourge's god stood above the 5 human souls. Though prepared to fight, the patriarch did not wish to fight them himself. The image changed to his 2 red hands. With hands still stained from his crimes upon the mother, he crafted a body from nothing. The image changed to a long tongue slithering from his mouth. With his hateful tongue he wove magics that enchanted the body, giving it the cruel magics of Scourge. The image changed to another side view of the patriarch's head, his mouth open. With his breath he breathed life into this body, bringing a soul from the nightmare to it, and so he named this new servant Carver. The champions knew who the Carver was, from just seeing the silhouette. They all remembered their loss to him some time ago. The image changed to the Carver standing before the 5 heroes. There he stood, 4th servant of the patriarch. He returned to his throne. The image was just the Carver, standing before the 5 heroes with the patriarch behind him. The image changed to the 5 heroes fighting the Carver. And so their clash roared through the nightmare. Even the mother's world rumbled before this clash of souls. Then the image changed to them broken at the Carver's feet. But they did fail. Only the witch escaped, yet she could not hope to topple the empire of Scourge's god. The Carver marched onward, for his patriarch, for his art. I counted every kill from the deepest depths. 21,694 as of writing this, 822 years into the age of Scourge, all because he wanted to. The champions moved on, thinking they had seen all there was. The day the Carver emerged, the horrors he committed afterwards, the countless lives he ended, but then, as they walked across what seemed like one final bridge, the abyss around them dimly glowed. As one last image emerged, one depicting the patriarch, his mouth hanging open as scourge spilled out, the titans in his hands as the servants stand beneath him, the despoilers writhe from between his teeth. The champions stood speechless as words appeared before them. And yet did hope still shine in the faintest glimmers. Yet did the determination of the young people still have its chance to win. The hordes of the patriarchs slowed long enough for the peoples to gather, and now war was waged. And to you, dear heroes, you who have struggled for so long, I, the witch of this story, saw beyond time to see the 8 of you, long enough that I know you deserve to know this. Good luck on your journey. The champions stood silent before the words, each of them contemplating the gravity of this. Yet they all conclude they must move on. And then when they pass through the final exit, they see it. The true domain of the despoiler standing in the darkness, like the mass of a brain stretched and distorted into spires stretched into the darkness. Let's end this, Xeris says, as the champions charge forward to face the final despoiler. Good stuff. I think for constructive criticism here, it throws me off a little bit when the form of the messages is not consistent. So, you have this witch that carved these, it sounds like sort of a prophetic person, and some of them are in really simple AA rhyme, and others have no rhyming structure, and some have a bit of a sort of ABA situation almost. That throws me off a little bit. I almost feel like at the very least, characters should maybe comment on it or something, because when I notice it as the reader, it feels strange when the characters don't seem to address this at all. It feels even a little bit more weird. The progression through the tower felt okay at the beginning. We lost it a little bit at the end. But those would be the two main things. I think that the spatial motion of the scene starts to lose itself later, and the inconsistency of the form of the messages. But everything else felt good. I like getting all this interesting info. This is a cool way. I like these depictions of glass are a really fun way to have sort of a fantastical, almost museum of someone's prophetic vision. I like it. For day 518, the prompt was, how are veterans of wars treated in your world? And this comes from Kendamarania in the Discord. Kendamarania writes, Veterans of the Sinner's War, an entry in City of Woe. The war never ended. It still is raging on, in the minds of all those shivering in the cold and wrath, huddled and covered by newspapers and itchy blankets while the rain hits us. Animus Favirol, Sinner's War veteran. About 1.4 million Corpesians, both men and women from the city itself, its overland territories and colonial states all served in the Sinner's War. 1931 through 1937, and 300,000 died, with 500,000 wounded. The experiences of the war, from its brutal and dehumanizing training to the whizzing trenches of the first phase, the sleep-deprived, terrorizing second phase, and costly and slow third phase, left an extreme amount of soldiers showing symptoms of PTSD, and more specifically shell shock and other combat stress reactions. Even amongst those who did not directly serve in combat or were physically injured, many were left mentally fractured by the traumatizing effects of the war. Upon the veterans' return to the city and its colonies, Corpi was left to economic and political ruin. Many of their homes were displaced or even destroyed in occasional air raids perpetuated by Deneb and Nagana, and for those living in the colonies, Corpi was forced to give those colonies to the expanding Deneb Empire, having their city betray them. Many of their loved ones branded their returning sons and daughters, husbands and wives, fathers and mothers, as cowards and weak for losing the war. Even on the onset of World War II, where many more sinners began flooding Corpi and creating new job opportunities, these veterans were too often left physically or mentally debilitated or injured for them to be useful in the workforce. The city did not care for these veterans, it seemed. Renewal and trust funds granted by the city that would have aided veterans with psychiatric and economic help, humanitarian aid in the form of clothes and food, and low-income housing were often taken and misused for greed by different criminal organizations, including the Mani Malvagi. Thousands of veterans were left homeless or in poverty. Thousands of men and women trained to kill in a city that didn't care for them. Some veterans of the city chose darker paths. Seeing the economic disparity caused by the Erkalan Pact, the Triple Alliance of the war caused in vengeance to Corpi, veterans began turning to a life of crime, committing impulsive or planned murders, looting, disruption to infrastructure, prostitution, even some joining organized crime families and groups like the Blank Sinners. The city's institutions, including its police force, judiciary system, and government full of pseudo-dynastical Goetia, did not care for the poor and discarded veterans that served to protect the city. Much of this was done out of pure desperation and disparity, along with some wishing to relive their days with a rifle in their hands. Considering a lot of its inspirations and the time period in which it's set, I probably should have been able to guess a lot of this about City of Woe, and I think I would have if it had been something I was guessing about, but it still works. I mean, sometimes predictable things are good for us to write down, right? I think if anyone had a decent chunk of Kendamarania's world in their head and you were to ask them, how do you think the veterans are treated in City of Woe, they probably wouldn't answer with good. And so this checks out perfectly for that. Gives us good coverage, too, on sort of the different interesting dynamics that we could potentially experience in the world based on where veterans have been shunned to. What the problems of the sort of dejection of them has actually led them to be doing, which is really the important thing as a world builder here, is knowing what consequences certain actions resulted in. I Am Crab174 writes, The Hollowed Knights. I've talked about the Hollowed Knights before, the brave elves who rode into battle against the Necro King and his cult. While more than half of them lost their lives in the fight, the ones who returned were treated almost like gods. An entire multi-day festival was put on for them, later turning into a full-on yearly holiday. The armor they wore became nearly divine objects. Family members of the knights display the armor as the most valuable family heirloom an elf can own. Some elves would marry simply because the person they were marrying was descended from a Hollowed Knight. With their long lives, the Hollowed Knights themselves enjoyed the most comfortable life one could get. They were set up with high positions, power, money, basically setting their family up for generations. So you could say, veterans are treated pretty damn good. Interesting, because my constructive criticism here would be, well, those seem like pretty special veterans. What about the lay people? What about your average Joe, your average foot soldier? Are those people treated good? But otherwise, I mean, too short to really give too much criticism on. I enjoyed it. Actually, pretty solid stuff on giving us just enough context for this short snippet that I kind of do remember the Necro King situation and the Hollowed Knights just enough, I think, that I was able to piece this context together. Nugget writes, A Witchfinder's Lament, an entry in Time Traveler and the Immortal. 1847. A young, red-haired girl sat outside, the wind moving through her hair as she watched the ships and sailors at the harbor below. It was a calm scene, like one would see out of a storybook, but she was not alone for long. A boy around her same age with long black hair came up to her with a daisy pressed playfully in his mouth. The girl laughed. She took the flower out of his mouth. Good evening. Guten Tag, Amelia. The boy took the daisy from Amelia's hand and tucked it in her hair instead. There we go, that's better. Thank you, Phineas. Amelia smiled. Lovely view of the docks from here. All those little sailors with their boats. Oh, yeah. Gorgeous, aren't they? You know, I like to think in another life I could have been part of the Navy. Surely you could. Isn't your family military? In a way. The Coggins are witch-finders, so you won't find many witches out there on the water. Just pirates mostly. But I envy them. How I long to be out there on the open sea, wind on my back and salt in my hair. That would be the life. I take it your father wouldn't approve. Nein, but he really does. Doesn't like me writing poetry either. You write poetry? Phineas's face went entirely red, not unlike his sons often did some years from now. Bad poetry. You wouldn't want to read it. Don't worry about it. But I do want to. I'm sure it's lovely. Perhaps someday, then. How is your father doing? Phineas got quiet, taking a moment to watch the boats below and to smell the sea air before answering. He has better days and also worse ones. I noticed that with a lot of the Witchfinder army actually. Doesn't sleep much. Mistakes common noises for being under attack. It's fairly common for Witchfinders to be drafted into wars like any other army would be, though I forget if that happened to him. I don't really like asking him many questions about it. That sounds really hard. It's an honorable position, but it's going out of practice. It's mostly kept within families these days, though there's still respect in it. People still shake his hand, thank him for his service. They even do the same for me sometimes, even though I'm not official yet. Does he like that attention? I don't know. He doesn't like a lot of things these days. Apparently, a doctor wanted to send him away once. Why? A danger to himself, I guess. I've heard stories about asylums people get sent to for things like that. It's mostly women it happens to. Hysteria, they call it. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. If I ever go mad, I think I'd rather just suffer at home than be sent away. I don't think he will. My father is a strong man, not the type to succumb to moral failings. If you say so. Phineas checked his watch. Speaking of, I should be home soon until we meet again, I suppose? Amelia smiled. Of course, I like our talks. And I hope you bring some of your poetry. Nein, I don't think I will, Phineas joked before beginning to leave. Auf Wiedersehen. I really, really like that we get a very touching, very empathetic piece of exposition about Phineas and Amelia meeting and about Phineas in general, something that is, in many ways, to Phineas's credit, to the credit to his character. It also speaks a lot to sort of the impact that home life and values of family end up having on your future moral dilemmas and future sort of character. You wonder what all did Phineas go through to become as dark of a human as he did. Really great stuff. For day 519, the prompt was, what is the sharpest blade or object ever created? And this comes from ScrubsyBoy844 in the Discord. The Wanderer writes, the immortal blades of the old world, an entry in Endrin. Tell me, old smith, can you make me a blade like in the old legends? The stories say that you made or assisted in the forging of some of the most powerful swords in history, even Anduin's. The ancient smith sighed, reminiscing about times longer ago than most existed. That blade was the finest work I ever made. Made it out of dawn, eternium, and just a slight blend of midnight. Sharpest blade I ever helped forge, though I can't say I could have made it without Anduin. We forged the sword out of the dawn of the light force, when its pulse on the world was primordially strong. When we finished making the blade, tempering the blade in the eternal fire and quenching it in the falls of Tyne, it's still just as sharp as it was then to this day. Over 2 ages past, the blade is still as sharp as that day. Of course, Enurana and Enrest were not surrendered yet, so there wasn't days or night. It was a beautiful blade, grace incarnate. It wounded the great betrayer Krith. The dark turned to starry. Like all things that touch the blood of an Astari, the blade I helped make is still stained with his blood. The hero had read the tales. Anduin had been the one to slay Kirth. That was why he sought this smith. That, and he was one of the few from the old world still living. As hard to kill an immortal as the S now were, the old world, at least in tales, seemed that their legendary power was not beyond that of other foes that existed then. He turned to look at the aged but still powerful smith. Can you do it then? Make an immortal blade? Can you make me a blade like unto Anduin's, like unto the Asastyle, the star radiant? The smith pursed his lips. There lies a problem there, the smith said. If it be about the ability to pay you or a trial I need to overcome, rest assured I will prevail, the hero said. The smith sighed. A trial ahead of you is one of time. Time? The hero asked. time, you are of a mortal race, and immortal blades are not a swift endeavor to make. They are not forged in these ages, not because the power is not there to forge them, not because the knowledge is lost or denied to the world, nor are there lack of creation from the unworthiness or lack of wealth, for I have never once charged for the creation of a blade. No, these blades are not forged this age for twin reasons. The first is that, save my own Anduin's, and that at the falls of time, no forges that can make them exist. Their masters of all the others have died, and their forges left to rot and decay. But that would not stop it. The power exists to remake them, if a great dedication, the likes of which is scarcely known this age, was made. No, the other reason is that blades like those legends took a great amount of care to make. Like a great nation, the swords were made, corrected, and refined over countless centuries. I fear it is not your wealth or worthiness that you lack, but the ability to face the wear and tear of centuries deep. And a blade like S's style. That blade took over 4 centuries to make the materials alone. And for what it was comprised of, that was swifter by far than many of my other creations, the smith said. The hero nodded, disappointed, but still determined. May I ask you something shameful, then? Yes, asked the smith. Could you forge me the greatest blade you can forge within the lifespan as one such as I, say within a half score? The smith laughed. There is no shame in that, my friend, and it shall be so. While the immortal blades of the ages past are marvels and powerful to be sure, like the rest of their age, they are few foes remaining worthy of their majesty. I shall form for you a great blade, one that will rival the strongest made this age. Rest well, my friend, for in half a score today I shall present to you one of the finest blades found newly forged from this era. The hero smiled and gave great thanks. Kind of tried to fuse a few different kind of ideas I had in my head. Sort of forge character from Elden Ring, a little dwarven, a little just generally British crossed with some Australian, just kind of what felt right. And I enjoyed getting to read for this character. This was well written little scene, very evocative, very fun to have an ancient character calling back to times of lore, and this hero sort of being very respectful of that and sort of humbly asking for something much more meager, yet something still like worthy of the hero of the story. It's a good little spot in everything that's going on here. For day 520, the prompt was, is there a hierarchy in your world, and if so, how does it function? And this comes from EclipsEternal in the Discord. EclipsEternal writes, Order built on blood, an entry in Shattered Tale. You gain power in only 2 ways. You provide something so useful to the world that no one dares to usurp you, or you become so strong that no one can usurp you. The hierarchy is built on power classes. They are as follows. Commoners. These people hold little to no power. They usually are limited to basic magic. They make up a large majority of the population and are often found in lower-class towns such as Haven, Salem, and New Haven. Relic holders. Relic holders hold at least 1 common relic. This allows them to defend themselves against the Commonwealth. They are often found in production and common jobs depending on the god they are attuned to. Patrons. Patrons hold a relic either tied directly to a god, or in some rare cases a relic strong enough to rival such. Only 15 relics exist that are basic patron class relics. These are often overseers of towns or populations. They hold power in class 3 or 4 towns. Hegemons. A hegemon class relic is exceedingly rare. It requires a patron with enough power to transform their relic. These people are feared by the majority and hold power over tier 5 and 6 towns. Archons. Only 7 Archons can exist. Becoming an Archon risks corruption and requires 1 of 7 ancient class relics from a dead god. These people are bordering the definition of human. Some, such as the Archon of Gravitos and the Hive, are no longer considered human. They take domain where they please and do what they want. Vessel. Vessels are a one-time existence. They are the first Archon to a new ancient relics. These are never considered human. They can be humanity's savior or the calamity to destroy it all. Not a lot here to do criticism on, but I will point out that you mentioned class 3 or 4 towns, and then you say tier 5 and 6 later on. Just inconsistency on the words. Those are interesting, though. Hopefully we get a prompt that actually has you include that at some point. This idea of a class system for towns that is ranking them in some kind of numeric hierarchy, it's kind of fascinating to me. Stuff like that's kind of fun. Feels like video gamey in a cool way. Be interested to learn more. For day 521, the prompt was, what are some potential side effects of wielding your world's magic system? And this comes from Kendamarania in the Discord. Shrooms writes, the visage of Zena. The young Zena S. Valderhoof sat in attendance for the opening ceremony of the prestigious Royal Ostavican College of Magic. It was a truly exciting day for the entire nation. This year would be the first in the school's history to allow commoners to enroll. Zena was one of those commoners. The rambunctious crowd watched as the Academy's band played the Ostavican anthem, the music boosted via Magitech speakers. A silence fell over the crowd as Headmaster Bachmann stepped up to the podium. She pressed upon the microphone. Her ancient form loomed over the podium. An archmagi herself, Beckman's body was racked with the tells of late-stage metamorphosis. She raised her fragile hands before casting an incantation. Her voice boomed from the speakers. Welcome, aspirant mages and practitioners of the magical arts. I am Headmaster Madeline Edmund Bachmann, and this year is full of promising talent. The old woman took a deep breath in as if she was smelling the student body. Yes, you all will do nicely. I welcome you all to the Royal Ostavican College of Magic. Her hands moved in the air as sigils carved into her skin glowed. She pointed her thimble towards the crowd. The crowd watched the marching of spectral beasts, bursts of colorful light, and dancing figures shoot out of her body. The headmaster then disappeared into a flash of light, leaving behind a trail of glowing insects. Zena watched this display with rapt attention. The little girl swore to herself that she would be like her, a magi with no equal. 20 years later. Zena walked down the long hallway, her strides unnaturally long like everything else about her. She passed by a group of students who suddenly made way for her. Zena was now used to it, of course. She was a powerful magi, one who could destroy this entire wing if she so wished. People were intimidated by her power, her strength. She couldn't help but laugh at this, yet when she did, that damned whistling came out of her. Zena's moved her tongue over her rotting teeth, hollow things not fit for chewing. Of all the changes to her body, that one was the most regrettable. Zena nearly walked into the wall due to her rapid pace, stopping herself before the door to her old study. She got down on her knees as she quickly rotated the joints in her hand. With this, the door opened into the cramped space of her former study. I don't recall it being so small. It's quite annoying. Zena could barely fit inside, her body brushing up against the delicate instruments and potions. Crash! Oh my. She rotated her third rib to the left 17 degrees before touching the broken glass. The shattered mirror reconstructed itself in her hand. As she was going to put down the mirror, she stared into her reflection. What stared back wasn't the girl who first entered this academy. It was a monster. Dark, sunken goat eyes, a skin that sagged under her chin yet was pulled tight around her lips and eyes, spider veins across her face, teeth so rotten it could play a melody, and a myriad of other disfigurements. Her tears swelled in the sunken sockets as her long hands clasped at her face. It had been years since she last looked at her reflection, but the weight of this revelation shook her deeply. A small smile crept onto her face as she realized what she had become. I am like her. Ooh, we got some pretty horrific imagery here. Good stuff, really. I'm not gonna lie, I think the only criticism I could give would be a lot deeper stuff that I probably don't have the time to go into, and just about some of the structure here. You could expand a couple of these sequences of exposition into more scene-like moments, and that would probably give a little bit more, it would give us less overt information about the character and allow the reader to be informed more about them through actions and reactions and things like that. But that's a bit higher concept than the stuff I normally give out. I don't have time to dive into like the reasoning around that. Ed/Music Geekery writes, Ensorcelled Souls. Arcane energies are thoroughly baked into the fabric of everything that Daystara is. It is so utterly ingrained in the makeup of the world that even those who do not have skill wielding it still have the capacity to in some way sense it. Even Fred Bloggs, the farmer, might know a thing or two about how your basic identify spell works. So what does that mean for those who do wield it? Well, that can vary greatly. For some, it can have a massive extension or drain on one's lifespan depending upon the magic wielded. Masters of evocation magic often live far shorter lives than the necromancers and transmuters of the world, the ferocity of the magic they wield burning out their body much sooner. For others, it can result in peculiarities in aptitude in other areas. Summoners, for example, rather ironically are notorious for having absolutely abysmal direction sense. Abjurers, due to the severe demand on their bodies to cast a protection magic, have hyperactive metabolisms and thus must eat far more regularly than others. For divination specialists, their skills can also risk being a curse. Many of them rely far too much on their magics and thus often lose the use of their natural sense, or are at a disadvantage using them. Enchanters are often left physically weak from their over-reliance on the might of others, or else their use of enhancing spells can leave them wanting. Illusionists, more often than not, have an extremely distractible nature. Mechanics-wise, this would mean the players would have to roll a wisdom check to maintain concentration spells that aren't illusion spells, DC 8 plus spell level plus rounds maintained 4. To some, arcane spellcasters produce a particular scent, not comparable to anything naturally occurring, almost smelling like what a color could be described as smelling like. Rune mages smell of teal, barrier mages smell of orange and blue, and similar such strange descriptions. No one can quite explain why. They only know that this is the case. Fae in particular are known for having incredibly pungent scents. Some describe it as magenta, others as a greenish purple or perhaps a purplish green. It is common for the children of spellcasters to be born with an innate skill for magic, and indeed sorcerers can result from entire practiced lineages of wizards. What differentiates a wizard from a sorcerer is that the magic a sorcerer can wield is generally limited by what their antecedents may have practiced. The children of necromancy families are notoriously incapable of casting illusory or enchantment magic. A curious quirk amongst the Kilrathian and Solarian people is that they are often born with the ability to affect and manipulate the element their culture is aligned to. For most, this will be minor, simply being able to increase or diminish the strength, size, or intensity of small pieces, campfires and torches for fire elementalists, pebbles and rocks for earthkin, etc. But for those who truly hone this skill, they can earn themselves ferocious nicknames such as the Dragon of Ifral or the Living Typhoon. Perhaps the greatest side effect and danger to wielding magic is how readily it can attract the attention of powerful creatures and extraplanar beings. Many creatures of the planes will target spellcasters, either with offers of power and glory, to seek out as a mate to produce a powerful lineage upon the prime material, or to satiate a terrible hunger that can only be fed by magic-infused flesh. What was most terrifying about the Abrelain was their hunger for magic, and their ability to sense even the tiniest amount. During the Escalation and Liberation Wars, this led to the breeding and training of beings known as ciphers, abjuration mages with the ability to mask their magic through displacing it. A large number of ciphers were the product of necromantic and alteration magic cast on prospective sorcerers, the belief being that they would have the greatest chance of succeeding. Unfortunately, while they were successes, a distressing number of would-be ciphers were stillborn, the sheer intensity of magic cast on them overwhelming their still-developing bodies. Pretty cool stuff here. I like this idea of magic almost forcing a strange synesthesia. How does this affect the gameplay? I feel like that would be a fun thing to mess with, where detect magic would be almost a passive perception thing in some scenarios, at least where the mage was actually present. Unless I'm interpreting this wrong, but I like these ideas a lot. Kind of some cool stuff going on here. EclipsEternal writes, Corruption. Corruption can happen in one of two ways. The breakdown of who altered person is, or the tampering with powers beyond your control. The first means of corruption is often seen in people who have nothing else to lose. These people often act aggressively or in a feral manner. The corruption that takes place is called mania. Mania is not tied to any god and can happen to anyone. The second form of corruption is a lot more extreme and unpredictable. It requires someone to interact with either a relic or a source of power that they cannot fully control. This corruption changes based off what god the source is tied to. The currently designed ones go as follows: Abyssal Call. This is a corruption of the soul. It induces madness and hysteria on the infected. It is often caused by having a closer encounter with the abyss. Those who survive ramble about something calling to them. Infernal Blood. This is a corruption of the body. It is caused by prolonged exposure to the infernal arms. The infernal arms will burn anyone not worthy and slowly poison anyone who is. The person wielding this weapon is known as the Hero Archon. Slowly, over time, their blood is replaced by liquid fire. Frostborn's Curse. The vessels of frost are always born with this curse. It affects the body. Anyone affected dies within 5 years from freezing. This is because the Grimoire of Memories was cursed before it found a vessel. If they survive, they lack the capacity to use magic naturally. Ichor Poisoning. This is poison for the soul. It is caused by overexposure to the ichor of Kamenos. It slowly strips the capacity to generate mana from the affected. Its symptoms are toxic blood, a cough, and weakness of the body. Mechanical Madness. This affects the soul and plagues the mind. Those connected to Hostarion often find themselves replacing limbs with bionic replacements. The more extreme versions see the Archon of Mechanus transferring their soul into a construct and slowly being devoured by it. Cool stuff here. I like these really kind of hyper-specific things, scenarios that involve sort of specific worship or specific fields of study almost, and how that can backfire. Makes for great fantasy writing, makes for great like TTRPG setup stuff. Only constructive criticism here is there's just a few like trippy misspellings and grammar issues. The first paragraph I noticed one, and then I think the second or the second to last or last. But mostly just stuff that you fix in a go-over. Shrooms writes Magical Diseases. Magical Diseases and Ailments by Unknown. Manamorphosis. Manamorphosis is a general medical term used to describe several interconnected alignments. Manamorphosis is caused by high concentrations of mana inside the body for extended periods of time. Due to this, spellcasters and magic wielders are the largest and most prominent groups to exhibit it. Manamorphosis is often called mage disease, due to the extreme rates of contraction within those groups. Manamorphosis displays itself in an endless array of alignments, disfigurements, and mutations to the body. The most common symptoms are lengthened limbs, weight loss, muscle loss, gigantism, balding, excessive hair growth, skin crystallization, thinning skin, organ growths, sagging skin, tightening skin, extra sets of fingernails, bizarre pupil shapes, amongst many, many more. These alignments distinguish practitioners from their less magically inclined peers. Though not equivalent to manamorphosis, mana poisoning and void touch syndrome are related to the disease. Mana poisoning is a result of a high density of mana within an individual who cannot control the flow within their meridians. This causes rapid mutation and, in serious cases, death. It is commonly found in aspiring mages, sorcerers, and those consistently exposed to high mana concentrations. Void touch syndrome is a syndrome that almost exclusively affects mages who use a substance known as tar. Tar is also known as black balm or magician's salve. This substance, derived from magical practitioners, is an extremely potent drug that raises mana concentration within an individual, allowing them greater spell potency and range. The manufacturing and trade of this invaluable resource is heavily regulated and guarded. Use of tar far beyond a practitioner's limit results in a series of rapid transformations, creating a void touched. The exact workings of void touch syndrome is unknown, and research into the subject is seen as taboo. Perhaps a more enlightened society will see the folly in this. I'm not sure. So I read all of them as alignment because that's how they were spelled, but did you mean ailment? I wasn't 100% certain because I figured maybe alignment is a mechanic in the magic system you have going on here. Couldn't quite tell, but that maybe is the constructive criticism, is that if that is a mechanic, then it might have been good to give us just a tiny bit about it up front, and if it's not, definitely want to fix that, because that is an actual other word, and it is very confusing versus ailment. But cool stuff here. I mean, we're getting a lot of really fun things with this prompt. I dig sort of the consequences of magic, of really any power source. This tar stuff especially is really fascinating to me at the end here, like a different... I was always a fan of, you have a fantasy world, you have a drug that makes powerful people in the fantasy world more powerful, but then has all these sort of horrible caveats. So you have something that can help people chase, dreams of power or dreams of something, but at a cost that is often far too great for most other people. Pulpman 5000 writes, Seroth, cost of magic. Magic has an inherent cost of energy, yet what exactly the cost is varies wildly depending on the magic in question. For some, it's a cost of physical energy. The rage of fire and the acrobatics many use to channel magic are known for how draining they can be. Overexertion may lead to several side effects, such as the energy quite literally being drained from one's muscles. For other elements, it's environmental. Ice may draw upon the cold air surrounding the user. Nature may draw upon the plant life nearby. Overexertion on this front may lead to things like plant life falling apart due to the strain of being manipulated by magic. Generally, though, for many, the cost is negligible. Usually only against a horde of the scourge is the cost truly considered for even a moment. After all, especially for those fighting dozens of the Patriarch's horrors alone, the cost could very well creep up on someone. I really like this. The one thing that really got me here was the idea of nature being the thing that gets expended when you use its magic. There are things like this in the real world in which the cost that we pay is a much longer term cost. The idea of we damage the environment, we don't directly damage ourselves, but that damage will eventually come back to bite us. You could do a lot with that in a magic system that actually hurts the environment when utilized to use the environment. Kind of a really cool thing here. I like this a lot. Again, not a ton of meat here for me to pick apart with the constructive criticism. In fact, I don't really have much of anything, which I think is a good sign. This is all good stuff. I couldn't find any little thing that was super trippy or that I felt didn't work. Stablocci writes, Soul Sickness, Contracts, and Demon Names, an entry in Moore's //Vita. Soul sickness is where someone had both body and mind, but whose soul had been expended to the point where it is incapable of much of anything. It is a type of trance, not unlike the one someone might find themselves in from meditation, or the trance someone might be induced into by a hypnotist. Like being hypnotized, a person experiencing soul sickness becomes partially suggestible. If even a slight bit extra is expended, it can reduce the soul to nothing, producing a husk without a soul. This is impossible to come back from. This is called soul death. For mortals, recovery is simple, as the soul will regenerate itself over time. Prospects for angels and demons is far more grim. Their souls do not regenerate, so it must be sourced from somewhere else. The main way that it is recovered is through contracts. Contracts are spells that bind two souls, some price for some kind of reward. The most favorable is between a demon or angel and mortal, as the regenerative properties of mortal souls can be taken advantage of, and the contractor provides the power of their name. By far, post-mortals have it the worst. They lack the regenerative souls of mortals and the names of demons, so in turn they either need to offer their service. This rightfully sucks for post-mortals, so they often resort to just murder. Contracts for demons, however, do not come without their inherent risks, however. Contracts must contain a reference to both parties. Mortals and postmortals do not have names as such, so their blood or some other container of their soul must be used. Demons and angels have spells written in soul script as their names, and that is what is used as the reference. If their name is discovered, either by the contract being discovered or by reverse engineering their powers, then spells can be written that reference them without their knowledge. This is bad because someone could just write a spell to make them explode or something. Really kind of fascinating to me because I have a couple of things that align really closely, and yet all the little details are different. There's a thing called a Zedef in Atovia, which is someone who has expended their soul too much via the overuse of transfusion in Metawork, and that produces a husk. That soul has been fully sort of destroyed. And getting close to that point gets someone towards this like headache and hallucinations and some other different symptoms. And then also, I have things called contracts, which are kind of things that bind two souls together. So it's sort of kind of fascinating how two people in completely disparate environments wind up creating a couple things that seem very oddly similar, and yet all the little things in between are pretty different. Your definition of demons and how they differ from mortals and things like that is completely different from my own work, and so it's kind of a cool thing to see. In terms of constructive criticism, there's a little bit of clunkiness with some overuse of some words like however I saw in one of the paragraphs, but most things, like a lot of stuff here, I think is just kind of the sort of thing that you would clean up if you look over this stuff again. I felt like in general this was well done and also gave us enough, we have enough context about the things that surround a lot of the words and concepts you're using to relatively grasp what you're throwing at us here. Nugget writes, Magic Corrosion, an entry in Prometheus Society.
Magic corrosion, also called overload in some places, it is a condition that occurs when someone has more magic than their body can handle. Magic, despite being the fabric of the world, is dangerous to the body. Too much causes it to erode, but too little causes decay. The latter of which is extremely rare. You'll only really see it if something or someone intentionally bleeds someone dry. Magic corrosion, however, that one is more common. Symptoms depend on the individual, though ailments to the eyes are common. Memory, too. Many cases involve the body trying to rid itself of the excess magic by trying to expel it by force, which ends as one might expect. Some people just get progressively weaker and weaker as their magic destroys their body. Some begin sustaining heavy burns on their extremities. I've seen elves age from having too much of it. I've seen examples of all of these in person. Victor Cogwin, blind as a bat and barely remembers where he is half the time. Lumen Aurum, can't contain the power of the Philosopher's Stone inside his own body to save his life. Corvus Malediction, body withering away from eternal hunger. Irony is that it was his own doctor poisoning him with magic the entire time. Poor man died never knowing what he might have been capable of. Amorous Aurelius, when was the last time you saw an elf with gray hair? It is this magic corrosion that requires weavers to change their hosts. As their bodies are mortal, they are prone to corrosion due to the sheer amount of magic a weaver contains. After a certain amount of time, dependent on their host's tolerance for magic, their body will begin to fail and they will have to find a new body. They see it like replacing their shoes when they get too worn and seek out those with high arcane tolerances to fuse with. A horrifying fate, in my opinion. You could find someone else for that, Archivist.
Hopefully this voice I've been using is good. I don't actually know who's speaking, so I'm going for a little bit of a lower vibe, maybe to get across something spooky. Hopefully you're enjoying the voice nugget. If not, as always, let me know if I can correct it in some way, if it's supposed to be more feminine, if it's supposed to be an accent of some kind, if it's supposed to be a little bit higher pitched, whatever it may be. I know that this magic corrosion stuff is a little bit common to all of your settings. If I'm correct, Nugget, you'll have to let me know as well if that's correct. But I feel like I remember something along these lines being a common theme, which I think is kind of cool. Nugget pulls a lot of the same metaphysics for everything. Even though they're not technically in the same universe, they're in the same multiverse, you could kind of call it, or mindscape almost, with some of the other little snippets of writing we've gotten from Nugget. For day 522, the prompt was, what is a famous riddle or group of riddles in your world? Now, at the time of recording, we didn't have any posts for this one, which is completely fine. I think it would have been a fun one to get some for, but I kind of get that sometimes these can be tough to come up with, especially ones that you feel good about. For day 523, the prompt is there a place in your world known particularly for its beautiful vistas/landscapes? EclipsEternal writes, Sunset Fields, ST number 5, Halls of the Abyss. Halls of the Abyss is the 5th installment of Shattered Tale. Playing as Iris Knight in a choose-your-own-adventure book, you see many wondrous places, of which I have not designed yet, but there is 2 locations I have designed and intend to include. The simplest of these is the Sunset Fields where the Eternal Rest ending can be found. Keep in mind, this is a preliminary piece and should be considered as just the basic idea. You've been wandering for hours through the dark corridors. As you continue forward, you start to wonder if there even is an exit. You find yourself at an eternal sunset overlooking a field of flowers. It goes on for as far as the eye can see. Choosing to stay and rest a bit, you record one last audio log as you grow drowsy. Ira, if you can hear this, I hope you know that I spent my life caring for you. I'm lost in these endless halls. I've seen beauty untouched by our world and sorrows incomprehensible. I wish you could be here to see this beauty, but that would mean you would be stuck here with me. Just know I never intended to get stuck here, but I don't think I'm leaving. End of audio log 557. Who am I kidding? These logs will never be seen again. Ending. eternal rest. Return to page 2 as you wake up back in the library. Okay, cool. I mean, neat that we get a picture of an ending to a future Choose Your Own Adventure book that Eclipse apparently wants to write. It's kind of neat. Constructive criticism, there's some touchy grammar in the first little section, but maybe that doesn't matter so much considering that's not the part you actually think will go in the book anyway. The part that was in the book was good. I think that there's a little bit of overuse of the word like beauty twice in a row there. Sometimes some people care about that more or less than others. I don't like the word repetition personally, but I don't think it's a slight on an actual person's writing. This is a personal feeling that always sticks out to me if I see repetition of a word where I feel like some other kind of descriptor could be used. Kendamarania writes, The Chroma Mountains, an entry in Return to Faelund. The Chroma Mountains are a prominent feature in southern Faelund and one of the few permanent features of the realm since the Zoatic era. It is described as a mountain range which glows a brilliant rainbow color under the polar aurora borealis. It has been occupied by a variety of peoples throughout the centuries. At first, it was inhabited by the dwarfs, who hollowed out the mountains into stone halls and cities, building a fortress complex underneath the snowy peaks. However, the dwarfs mysteriously disappeared not too long after the Elven era began, without a trace left behind. Theories about their disappearance range from unleashing a curse set by the Zoa of Oblivion to potentially falling out of the realm itself. The next people who inhabited the Chroma Mountains were the Wisps, ghostly beings who uttered no words and adorned shining armor. They settled in the empty dwarfen halls and ruled for thousands of years, expanding the fortress complex into a sprawling city inhabited by friendly undead. Under the kingdom, the Color Court, the Wisps would have a strong presence throughout the rest of Faelund, working closely with the elves. Once the long fog was waged, however, a months-long siege was laid by the witches against the Wisps who wished to conquer the mountains in order to acquire old dwarfen technology and find out the key on why they all left. The siege of the Chroma Mountains was also the first instance of Gearwizzes, great clockwork dragons made in the image of monstrous beasts of fire, which would be used effectively. While no wisps died, such is the nature of their non-corporeal forms. The Color Court was ravaged and utterly destroyed, scattering the ghosts across the realm into hiding or assimilating into witch society. As of 1148 EE, the mountains are under witch control. Sounds like a beautiful place. It is sad that such a beautiful place is taken by the witches of all who could live there. Of course, it's the witches. Maybe that's a little bit of the grim darkness seeping into Return to Faelund, the taking over of the gorgeous mountain by the few people that maybe you could be considered evil are the least heavily corrupted in Return to Faelund. For day 524, the prompt was, who is well known as a pacifist individual or group in your world? Nugget writes, The Wrath of Moors, an entry in Time Traveler and the Immortal. Vida is dead. Ironic when you think about it. The goddess of life dead. Moors was inconsolable. She quickly picked up the pieces of her soul to avoid bleeding. They're sitting on a shelf in his study. The first that she collected, but certainly wouldn't be the last. Moors walked the shattering world until he found what he was looking for, lounging on a cloud with a drink like he had nothing better to be doing. Aurelius, Moors yelled. Emrys looked up. Ah, Moors, kind of you to join me. What has Vida ever done to you? It's more the fact that she was there. She's vouching for you, Star Child, as was I. She convinced me I was doing the right thing in letting her live, and this is how you repay her. Wait, really? Huh. Well, that really sucks then. Do you feel any remorse? She was a god, Grim. You're all the same. She was there just as you were when Stella called me a mistake to my face, and much like you, she did nothing. Then hold that against me. Me, not her. What are you planning on doing about that? I could still kill you. Well, Emrys finished his drink and set it down on nothing, only for it to fall up towards the sky rather than down. Emrys jumped from the cloud to meet Moors on the ground, standing directly in front of her, unarmed. Go ahead. Kill me then. You've ignored direct orders before. You can do it again. Strike me down, right now. Mor's grip tightened on his scythe. Emrys smiled. You won't do it, Emrys laughed. You won't kill me. You won't do it because you love me. It takes a very cold and a very cruel person to rip away Vita's gift, and I don't think you can. I know far too much about you so-called gods, and you've never once gone out of your way to be violent. You're too weak to do that. You wouldn't dare kill me, not even to save your sister's life. Emrys was cut off by the scythe cleanly slicing through his neck. As a god, he did not die immediately. His head rolled off his shoulders, but was caught by Mor's. She was innocent, Starchild. She did nothing to you. She did nothing, and you murdered her. You scorned her gift. You killed her children. Mor's continued her outrage by throwing Emrys's headless body to the ground and pinning him down by impaling him through with the scythe. Mor slammed Emrys's head back onto his neck. Do you feel any remorse? Mor's growled, leaning down to be eye level with Aurelius. Emrys said nothing. He stared at Mor's, eyes wide and filled with fear, choking and coughing up blood. Emrys breathed quickly and heavily, trying in vain to crawl away from death, but failing due to the blade running through his abdomen. Mor stood up and picked his scythe back up, freeing Aurelius. Emrys hastily stood up, visibly shaken, and taking a few steps back. You will not die by my hand. Do not mistake my kindness for weakness, Starchild. Mor's glared at Emrys, a piercing, angry stare from her remaining eye that Emrys had never seen before. Emrys continued to cautiously back up before turning around and breaking into a full sprint. Mor's continued to glare in the direction Emrys ran, even after he was far from sight. She had been letting him get away with this for too long now. I love these moments of Emrys grappling with humanity that he doesn't have. It's sort of fascinating. He's a godlike entity and runs away from Mors, who is not a being you can really run away from. There's a hypocritical simplicity in the actions that Emrys takes when Emrys suddenly has lost the facade of confidence, and Nugget does a really good job of writing this stuff. I mean, these scenes are easy to read and feel like I can get into the state of the characters and deliver the dialogue in a satisfying way. Nugget's ability at these scenes has grown substantially since we started all of this. Not that they were not good to begin with. Nugget has always been quite gifted at this, but it has been fun to watch this stuff and get to read through it like this. So thank you, Nugget, as always, for providing us with some excellent, excellent stuff from your forge. For day 525, the prompt was, what lies west? What is the westernmost point someone has gone or wants to go? And this comes from Probin the Great and the Discord. EclipsEternal writes, the Necropolis. Shadow Tale number 6, Cursed King's Crusade. Far to the west lies the Great Necropolis. It is the world anchor for the god Oblivion. As a level 6/6 town, features only undead hosts. Part of the funeral rites is sending the body to the necropolis, where it can either be brought back or laid to rest. Watching over the necropolis is the Overseer. The Overseer is a hegemon of Oblivion. He cannot die so long as the tree in the center of the necropolis remains standing. Once per year, the Overseer hosts a week-long festival for loved ones to see their deceased. It is one of the biggest celebrations in the world. In the Cursed King's Crusade, the necropolis is the second world anchor to fall and the first one in Act 6, the Great Crusade. The king attacks the necropolis head-on. In one last bit of strength, the Overseer sacrifices the people living in the city to bring alive a great beast lying dormant below. The necropolis falls as the tree burns in the center. Interesting. Okay. Fascinating stuff here. Again, context stuff would be nice. We don't have to have it, though. Clearly, you have a lot of things planned that you're not writing here yet, and maybe that's intentional, too, because you don't want to spoil too much of the project you're working on. This Shattered Tale multi-segmented thing seems kind of interesting to me. I'm curious to see kind of what your plan is with this Eclipse. Maybe you will elucidate us at some point. Or maybe you already have, and I'm forgetting, and in that case, that's on me. Kendamarania writes, what lies west? An entry in Return to Feylund. Kendamarania notes at the top, the call signs really don't make sense, but it's worth for a funny reference. The proper entry begins now. Unicorns, what do men know about us? Ferocious creatures of Fae we all are. There is no being walking this land that is more vain than us. Did you know we lie about being tamed by virgins pure of heart as well? Indeed, there are many things that we lie about. Lady Alethea, mage of the crystalline order. Call signs: heavy cloven hoofprints. Trails of flowers not belonging to the biome. Iridescent bloodstains. White mane hair. Unicorns are a race of Fae native to the Marwood, an alpine forest far west and south of the continent. Despite living in a subpolar latitude and near the snow-covered Chroma Mountains, Marwood almost never experiences seasons due to magic's influence, always being in a state of spring. The forest is considered one of the most dangerous parts of Faelund, alongside the northern wastes, due to the heightened presence of magic and absurd creatures that reside in it, the unicorn being one of them. Unicorns themselves are described by eyewitnesses as having the head of a horse, the body of a deer, hooves and beards of a goat, a lion's tail, and a large spiral horn resembling a narwhal's tusk. They're generally of a slender build and distinguished by their white mane hair. It is also sometimes stated that their iridescent blood, when drunk, has the power to heal any poison and disease, although this is a matter of fiction. Historically, unicorns were not considered one of the sapient races of Faelund, like goblin kith or elves. Instead, they were considered a monster due to their wild, ferocious nature. They were also very secretive and not often sighted outside their homeland of Marwood, making them a rare blessing to be witnessed. They were also often hunted down by various races for their purported healing properties and the value of their horns. Not much was known about their actual nature, as they never stepped outside their forest. They lived in nomadic tribal societies, grazing the land and protecting the magical creatures that resided within them. Unicorn culture centered around their belief on animism in the worldview of the Zoa of life, with every aspect of the realm having their own soul. Like the wisps to the south, they additionally dealt with clairvoyant magic by peering through the veil of time, seeing the short-term future. The unicorn tribes were one of the many obstacles Lizel Flores faced in her first adventure, chasing her out of Marwood and to her last leg towards the Chroma Mountains. While the human managed to cross the realms again back to our home on Earth, many of the races in Faelund were already beginning to wage war against each other, the unicorns being no exception. However, their homeland of Marwood was one of the first to be targeted by the races, burnt down by the witches, and forcing all the magical animals to relocate. The unicorns fiercely fought to defend themselves and the forest, but were defeated thanks to the new discoveries regarding Pigsy Sand. They would eventually become one of the main armies fighting the races during the Long Fog, continuing to do so after the wisps died out and reaching as far east and north as the Elfin Vale. There were some unicorns who objected with their race's practice of warfare, such as Lady Alethea. She would be excommunicated by the tribal elders and find refuge elsewhere, eventually in the fallen elven city of Hjosalfam. This is a fun little homage to sort of the style of What Lies West, Predwin's own work. Kendamarania clearly taking some inspiration there, especially with the call signs idea, but then also a little bit with the formatting here. And it came through, actually. You could tell that Kendamarania has read those or has listened to them, at least here. That was a lot of a fun read, kind of a cool take on the unicorn idea, very fantastical, very Oz-like, crazy hodgepodge character with some differing sort of personality than what you might expect. It's good stuff. It's very Return to Faelund. The Wanderer writes, The Gate of Midnight, an entry in Endrin. The Gate of Midnight. As I've mentioned, implied and stated a few times, Endrin is a building built around a colossal courtyard. However, there was already an edge to that courtyard. The gate of morning from which the first light of creation sprung. Light and matter, space and time was forged from its pure essence that poured forth from it. And yet, across from its pristine white and gold marbled door stood another, closed, waiting. The Gate of Midnight. Its black and gold towering walls and gate have stood there since the dawn of existence and likely far before. To those who know of its purpose, they know that when the colossal gate opens, everything will end. Time, space, life, death, everything in existence, and the one who shall open it will be the chief lord of the Astari, the supreme lord of the dark, though very, very few know why the champion of truth and justice such as he has a name as such. An odd feature about the gate is that it is always the furthest west thing that can be found. Sure, you can walk past it, or sail past it into the aether if you have an aether ship, but if you sailed west, you will always end up at the gate eventually. It is the setting of existence, it seems. No matter how strange or odd, its existence does not care about our trifling matters such as the logic of direction. It is, and always shall be, what lies west. Very cool. I love the mystical, ancient feeling of Endron a lot. You get these highly eldritch, just constructs of the universe that simply exist and have existed, and perhaps their purpose will never be fulfilled in an infinity, and yet at some point it also will be. For day 526, the prompt was, what is a common response to something that is deeply unnatural or unfamiliar? And this comes from Scrubsy Boy 844 in the Discord. Now, at the time of recording, again, we had no entries for this one. Again, totally fine. I think this one was a bit of a esoteric prompt for some people, but there's some interesting depth here that we could see. As always, if someone really has something they want for this day, you could use that for a Hammer Sparks entry in the future. For day 527, the prompt was, what are the stereotypes of people in your world? Where do they come from? And this comes from Kendamarania in the Discord. Stablocci writes, sins, virtues, an entry in Mors//Vita. There are 4 types of beings: mortals, postmortals, demons/angels, and immortals. There are 12 recognized types of demon, and those are categorized into the 7 deadly sins. The same is true for the 10 types of angels and the 7 virtues. The type a demon or angel forms into is determined by the personality of that demon or angel when they are spawned. There are more types of demons and angels than the sins and virtues, as each of the types represents different aspects of the sin. Leonins, lion-headed hornless demons, are a pride demon and are usually extreme braggarts and have inflated egos, whereas Onis, blue-skinned single-horned demons, which are also pride demons, generally believe they are always in the right. Gors, large red-skinned double-horned demons, represent the violence of wrath, and Snicks, black-skinned quad-horned demons, represent the hatred of wrath. The stereotypes of each type of demon are generally accurate as the personality informs the form, though this is only from their spawning. A demon that becomes reformed will still be of that type unless they go through rebirth into an angel, though this is extremely difficult to achieve. Sinners, postmortals sent to hell, and virtues, postmortals sent to heaven, also take on characteristics of the sins or virtues they believe they encapsulate at the point of their mortal body's death. Postmortals, however, cannot grow horns, and their skin tones are closer to that of their mortal bodies. They are incapable of rebirth, and therefore will keep their traits forever. A being is usually judged not on their personality, but the stereotypes of the type they are. This could be worse for sinners, as those that reform themselves will usually be treated as their old selves. There are also beings outside of these types, called high demons and high angels, which are shunned by others, especially residents of hell, as they are unpredictable and often more powerful. This is a good way to utilize this prompt to actually give us a bit of a hierarchy that's going on, the hierarchy of entities, kind of, or really just the subsets of types of entities. Good coverage on the demons and angels things. I like the connection we're getting here with the vices and virtues and 10 types of each. I believe there are like traditionally 9 types of angels, right, in Catholicism at least. So I'd be curious to know what all the types are. Maybe we'll get more about this. That this seems to be the crux of what a lot of Stablocci stuff spins around, or the angels and demons situation here. And I'm sure we'll get to see more, so long as they keep gracing us with more writing. As for constructive criticism, there's a little bit of stumbliness in a couple of the paragraphs, but again, with a lot of this stuff, it really is just a lot of these things are written quickly. So if you took a little more time and went over it again, then it would be fixed. But I'm not expecting people to do that for their submission. So I'm just going to give you what I see. And that's kind of the only thing I really saw in this one. I felt that you did give us pretty good context to understand and connect pieces here that we otherwise wouldn't have if you were just a little bit more careless with your exposition. For day 528, the prompt was, how much depth does your world or worlds have? And this comes from EclipsEternal in the Discord. Now, I think for the 2 entries we have here, there are icebergs, like the meme, like lore icebergs, for each of them, and I will have that up, taking up most of the image so that it's readable, and I will then read off the layers as they have been given to me by the individuals. There will be a visual component to this, but hopefully, just because we have the layers in text as well, for the podcast listeners, this should be relatively digestible. Kendamarania writes, the City of Woe iceberg chart, an entry in City of Woe. Layer 1, Surface Knowledge. The Mani Malvagi. The Mani Malvagi is Corpai's equivalent to the Italian Mafia and the main antagonistic faction of City of Woe, being an organized crime racket with extreme political influence over the city. It was originally founded by impish immigrants who settled in pride, being built on tenets of respect, honor, and duty to the common man. The old Malvagi family was overthrown by a demon named Pan Agokaris, who transformed the local gang into a feared presence that pulls the strings of the city on every level. Their blue-collar activities under Lucifer's rule include murder, theft, prostitution, protection, racketing, and drug trafficking. Their white-collar activities include bribery, extortion, embezzlement, and assassinations. They are an indirect influence over much of Corpai, from lowly businesses to the sanatorial Ars Goetia, turning it into the most corrupt nether city in all of hell. Pan's identity is not known to the general public, nor his past. His two children, Delphine and Maveth, who goes by the alias the Sandman, are prominent figures in the Mani Malvagi, being its underboss and main assassin, respectively. Layer 2. Recurring themes and elements. Ways to kill demons and sinners. It is possible to die in hell, more than once, too, if you are a sinner. As demons and sinners are beings made from the physical mass of hell, their bodies are weak to various substances and objects perceived as holy, especially if they are connected to heaven. These usually take the form of exorcism tools. Some of these materials include salt, iron, crucifixes, holy text pages, and holy water. Skin and organic contact with these materials usually results in horrific burns. Angelic blood, noted by their golden appearance, is especially lethal against demons and sinners, having effects relatively similar to liquid mercury poisoning. Post-industrialization brought forth many different ways and weapons a being could kill an unholy creature, with gunpowder weapons being introduced to Hell during the early modern period. Hell denizens would pack their bullets with trace amounts of holy water and crucifix splinters to strengthen the lethality of these weapons. By the 1940s, it's not uncommon to see bullets loaded with salt or made of pure iron. There are also rumors of people being able to weaponize angelic blood, golden blood showing on dead corpses who died from gunshot wounds. Layer 3, lesser-known facts. Emprianism. Emprianism is a folk religion natively born in Hell, post-fall, being widely practiced among theriocephaly demons. It is a non-theistic religion and philosophy that rejects all divinity coming from God, whom they believe is dead. They venerate the angels in heaven, such as Michael, Gabriel, and Azrael. The core tenets of Emprianism involve believing that life in hell is fundamentally doomed and flawed. The soul needs to be purified, and purification comes from virtue and devotion. Because they believe that there is no afterlife for demons, they wish to gain safe passage to a new heaven once final judgment arrives, as that brings a new life. Emprianists are fundamentally ashamed of their demonic selves, blaming God on their impurity and their suffering in hell. Virtue is defined by the Emprianists as values like self-sufficiency, self-love, humility, empathy, bravery, and not holding back truths. The angels in heaven are thought to exemplify these virtues. Daily life for an Emprianist varies, as it is not an organized religion like Catholicism or Shintoism. Veneration is usually expressed in manners like animal heads, a sign of the demon's shame of their self, crafting physical images, and daily prayers to the angels. Layer 4. Deeper lore in writing. The Great Corpuscian Fire of 1866. The Great Corpuscian Fire was one of the first major events that occurred in Corpai after the pilgrimage from Pandemonium. Prompted by a minor earthquake and flawed construction, and worsened by Lust's winds and an ill-equipped fire department, it burnt down nearly all of the old port town. It destroyed a significant chunk of lust, gluttony, and violence, causing an estimated 300 million drachma in property damage. Thousands were left homeless in its wake. King Beelzebub would help rebuild nearly all of Old Corpai, building on top of the old ruins and the Acheron sewers to create one of the city's crowning achievements in architecture. Ferrymen such as Charon Piera and Oksana Sodovieva still use the ruins of Old Corpai and the Acheron sewers to transport goods along the southern third of the city. Layer 5, one-off mentions. Hellion Cant. Hellion Cant is a constructed argot for City of Woe used by the criminal underworld of Corpai. Influenced by centuries of linguistic mixing from sinners from Earth, it first became prominent and properly developed after World War I, and again during the interwar period and World War II as millions of humans flooded Hell. It borrows an extreme amount of loanwords and jargon, as well as phonology that can be hidden in plain sight with a normal Corpuscian accent. Its grammar rules are meant to be generalistic and vague so that any demon, sinner, or fallen angel, no matter what tongue, can understand what is being said. It also uses a number of euphemisms to hide intent in the semantics. Below is an example of a sentence in Hellion Cant. De aquí recollector de basura is coming. Imp talaga the onions tossen. Translation: the trash man, the ferryman, is coming here. Toss the onions, angel tears, in the bag. Layer 6, obscure/implied details. Pre-fall demons/origin of demons. It is mentioned a couple of times in different lore dumps and short stories that demons existed before Lucifer fell from heaven, referred to as pre-fall demons. They are discussed more thoroughly in one of the classroom dialogues where Zyro and Parsno discuss the possible origins of their race. They theorize that demons may have existed for millions of years, far older than the Earth's 6,000-year lifespan. They may have been rejected by God under the assumption that he loves all of his creations except the demons, especially if they do not share DNA with humans or any potential animals on Earth. One argument against this is explaining why pre-fall demons never created civilizations before Lucifer. Layer 7, author-only knowledge. Hell itself is an allegory for depression. Spoilers for the City of Woe short story Blue Velvet. Content warning for discussions of depression and suicide. In the story Blue Velvet, we meet a character named Topheth who meets a suicidal fallen angel named Kaziel. In the end of the story, she reveals herself to be a personification of hell as a realm, having Kaziel submit to the earth and succumb to her despair. Kaziel herself also is stated to have a form of hellish decay, with the end of the story having her engulfed in it and put into a vegetative state. Many of the arguments made by Topheth regarding life are based on the viewpoint of philosophical pessimism, which states that life is not worth living and non-existence, death, would be preferable to existence. She uses that view of suicidal negative worth to justify people committing their worst impulses, wrought with sin. A number of times throughout City of Woe does hellish decay appear during times of extreme depression and suicidal ideation. Kalisha Reed, for instance, is very susceptible to decay as she feels utterly hopeless in her situation, being doomed in hell for all eternity. She uses alcohol and drugs to cope with eternal torment, causing her to sin more and more until she either breaks out of it or also succumbs to depression. Topheth/Hell itself says exactly what you want to hear, enabling you to destroy yourself. Especially during times like Corpi during the 1940s, a sinner can either listen in to her sayings or reject it, remaining hopeful despite periods of utter bleakness and trouble. It's great timing for this prompt, honestly, with how long we've had World Hammer existing and how long Kendamarania has written for it, because I remember bits and pieces of everything mentioned here, which is great. We of the World Hammer family, we Forge Masters, do know the depths of this lore, which is super fun, and the iceberg is really cool, and it's got a lot of stuff on it. I mean, Kendamarania has done a lot of good work. Shrooms writes, Lore Iceberg. We'll start with Layer 1, The Last War, an extremely large globe-spanning conflict that had been waged for a period of time between 200 years or 60 years, depending on who you ask. It is the first major industrialized conflict seen on the planet. Technically not the first, but they don't know that. Mana. Mana is primordial change and exists throughout the world. It is necessary for magic. Mages. Mages, also known by a ludicrous amount of other names, are individuals trained in the art of magic. Most mages are female. Tar, a biological concentrated form of mana. Tar is an addictive substance manufactured from mages to be used by mages. 5. Trench children. These are the all-encompassing term for the generations born during the last war, many of them being orphans. Manamorphosis. Read prompt 521, Magic Diseases, for more information. Now begins Layer 2. Horror of Himihul, a failed expedition to the mysterious northern continent of Himihul. Witches. Witches were people who, through unknown means, transformed into a witch. Witches are not inherently female mages, and their very presence curses the land they live on. TLDR, bad news bears. Summer Isle. The Summer Isle is an archipelago off the western coast of Crimea. It is not an island, but the decaying skeleton of a sunken megastructure. Ghost companies. Ghost companies refer to the many unrecorded, highly unethical experiments conducted by all sides of the last war. They are merely myth with no paper record. We're now on Layer 4. Below Jauk. Below the dunes of the Merchant Guild's infamous homeland is supposedly an ancient evil. Rumors are unsubstantiated but consistent. New gods. New gods refer to mortals who ascend to godhood. More complicated, but that's the basis. The miracle, a phenomena appearing in Ivara that twists the inhabitants in grotesque and painful ways. The population worship this as a god. Timeline disruption. At the final crescendo of the last war, each faction and side of the conflict simultaneously lost and won. Now we're on Layer 5. Sorrow Garden, the last resting place of a giant mechanical being. It sits against the cliff face of this highly volcanic, yet biologically diverse region. New Truth. The New Truth is the worldwide conspiracy perpetuated by the skeletons. Sunken Claim. The Sunken are a race of aquatic beings who believe the Summer Isle and the entire world are rightfully theirs. Obedience. The event that triggered the Disobedience War. Layer 6. Origins of Magic. Magic is a relatively new phenomenon to the world and is a direct result of the disappearance of the Relic Makers. Relic Makers, a hyper-technologically advanced species which disappeared long before contemporary history. Their megastructures and artifacts are found across the world. Skin and Bones. The skin and bones of reality which hold the fabric which the world is written upon together. They are the laws of the universe. Layer 7. Interlopers, mysterious groups beyond the skin and bones which have appeared multiple times in the history of the world. Beyond Wall, the firewall that stops interlopers from entering reality. Origins of Species. Almost every sapient species descend from the Relic Makers in one way or another. Layer 8. Sandy Loam. Sandy Loam, who is she? Kalpa Gates. Kalpa Gates are periods of history where existence is rewritten. And finally, Layer 9. True Name of the Point. No one knows the true name of the Point. They are among the sapient species not related to the Relic Makers, perhaps predating them? Interesting stuff. Very little detail here, but cool to see that there is. I think the organization of a hierarchy of depth of the world is kind of useful, actually, and I may try and do something similar. A mixture of what is niche lore for people that know the world, but also what is niche lore in world is potentially quite useful to give yourself an idea of how many people really know what piece of information. And oftentimes it's probably less than you might first imagine as the person who knows all the information. EclipsEternal writes, Iceberg. I've gone over the Pantheon, World Anchors, and the Great War plenty, but let's take a step back and see the parts I either almost never mention or have never mentioned before. The Pantheon seats are what provide power. Each of the 16 seats have general domain applied to them that the gods modify in some way. The world is not a constant. It can be destroyed, removed, changed, and even rebuilt from nothing. However, there exist two constants in the lore, the Abyss, where everything returns, and the Pantheon, where everything starts. The vessels are more than just a powerful character. They are the eventual new gods that will fill empty seats. Now we're getting to the part I don't ever talk about. The Elder Gods is a single domain at the head of the Pantheon. It is the only domain that can change. Every 1,000 years, the domain of the seat swaps between order and chaos. The gods that make up this seat are the only immortal gods. These two gods are Fate and Kamenos. Kamenos is Greek for lost. He has 3 names in the lore, but I only ever mention 2. After being banished from the Pantheon, he is stripped of his name, his domain, and most of his power. The humans call him the Demon Lord. After he is banished to the Abyss, he is forgotten again. When humanity rediscovers his history, they have no name for him, so they called him Kamenos, the lost god. I've not made a Pantheon name for Kamenos because naming him on the Pantheon would defeat the purpose of stripping it from all knowledge. It has no name because it cannot exist. Nice. Eclipse has a pretty solid, these are short snippets, but I can see the interplay and the interconnection between them, which I think is great. Makes sense. There's not a ton. They had mentioned in the Discord, mine feels so small compared to Kendamarania, but you don't always need scale depending on the kind of world building that you're doing. And I could tell that everything that you have built is connected to itself. And that is really much more key than having a ton of things. Plenty of us have a ton of things, but that interconnectedness sometimes can be a killer for people who are a little less experienced. So this is good. For day 529, the prompt was, is there a place many believe is haunted that is actually mundane in your world? Kendamarania writes, the Catacombs of Corpi, an entry in City of Well. Dacomer, help us, Kendamarania noted at the top. The proper entry begins now. A subject of popular urban legend and speculation, the Catacombs of Corpi encompasses much of the heresy burrow and bleeds into pride and fraud. Composed of crypts, ossuaries, and underground cemeteries, there is almost nothing concrete that is known about the catacombs, but remains one of the few mysteries of the city left to be solved. Description. The catacombs of Corpi span about 170 miles in tunnels and about 380 total city blocks. Most of the catacombs have been found in the Heresy Borough, with known entrances to the catacombs being near the Chiron Bridge and official city limits between Heresy and Fraud. Much of the walls of the catacombs are lined with real demon bones, skulls, and exoskeletons, along with countless buried coffins found underground. Several important figures have been found in the catacombs, including Sithanas Mastema, the leader of the Pandemonium Revolution, Pidre Haddad, the first adopted daughter of Beelzebub, and Asmodeus Shidonai, the former prince of lust. Gravestones can be found that date people's deaths as being between the late 1600s and the 1830s. At the entrance to the Chiron Bridge, an inscription can be found with the infamous quote, "Hail, the tyranny of Gehenna." Origin theories. Considering that the catacombs were only rediscovered around the 1920s, and latest burials being around the 1830s, the crowning of Corpi, there are several different theories for how the catacombs came to be. One theory that is popular with the general consciousness is that it was an aristocratic cemetery used at the start of the Corpesian Republic. Considering the amount of important figures in Corpesian history being buried, it wouldn't be hard to theorize that it was used during or prior to the revolution. However, the sheer amount of remains could disprove it. Another theory proposed was that it was used for military burials. The sheer size and figures found would make some assume that the tens of thousands of bones found would be former soldiers of Pandemonium and its navy, especially considering Corpi used to be a trading port and navy base. However, the fact that it was never used after the revolution, when war and conquest was ramping up, could also disprove it. In addition, there aren't many Pandemonium military burial traditions found in the catacombs. A more mundane answer would be that the size of the catacombs would indicate that it was formerly a mining operation and was used for torture. With the economic history of Corpi being built on mining raw resources, it can make one assume such the case, as well as Heresy's torture methods, trapping heretics in flaming metal coffins and burning them to death. The burn marks found around the catacombs could account for this, although it would not answer why all the walls and decorations are made of literal bones. A fourth, more outlandish theory is that the catacombs hide the spirit of the Pandemonium Revolution for the vengeful ghosts of the past buried away and locked. As part of a conspiracy by King Beelzebub, he locked the spirits of the revolution and the old regime away for the new republic, but they only grow more restless. The walls of bones are made to desecrate and disrespect the spirits so that they will never find a peaceful afterlife. In fact, it's why the city designated so many ethnic enclaves and ghettos to heresy right above the catacombs as a way to have their own misfortune land upon newcomers. This theory has yet to be proven or disproven. Modern use. Since the catacombs were discovered in the 1920s, it has seen renewed interest and intrigue as well as misuse. The catacombs and their legend made it a popular tourist spot, especially for wealthy citizens who were intrigued by its macabre nature and historical value, along with it being in line with their rumored favorite pastime, trampling over the dead and the working class. Others have used the catacombs for their own personal gain and interest, such as self-proclaimed cataphiles, urban explorers dedicated to mapping out and discovering the mostly restricted catacombs. Illegal activity can also be found in the catacombs, ranging from black market meetups, ferrymen from the Blank Sinners using the extensive network to hide in the city, and the many Malvagi using it for pillaging relics, moving underground with the ferrymen, and storing their resources and money. Great details, and again, we just talked about integration, but fantastic integration with a lot of different aspects of City of Woe with this very mysterious place and how lots of different groups interact with and think about this location. Really solid work, as always. And now we've come to Hammersparks, where writers can submit any kind of writing without any of the guards of a prompt or any sort of theming. This can be in relation to anything you would like to write, so long as world building is somehow incorporated. We aren't going to take essays on a Wikipedia article that you read, but we will take something that sounds like an essay if it's set in your world. Predwin the Great writes, Dune Wakers, an entry in What Lies West. Predwin notes at the top, everyone who reads the name says Dune Walker. It's not. It's Waker. Wake. To wake something. Sorry, proto-beholder thing. Insert funny quip. The proper entry begins now. The sand screamed about us. They begged to slow down. Sand flew like daggers that could cut through adamantine. We'd in a ruin with a small skylight in it, and that's when we saw the damn thing. A hovering, terrible behemoth chanting in the tongue of magic. Or so Schwerish said. Its one eye looked down into the hole at us. We thought we were dead. But alas, I am an unkillable bastard. Huh? Oh, no. Yeah, it just left us alone. Why interview me if you're going to ask everyone else first, Andrek? Rough, adventurer. Call signs: sandstorm, haboob variety. Overwhelming stench of graviturgy, described as the smell of rain. Headaches, altitude sickness. Vorpal tunneling, high magic presence, fey rifts. Pressure building behind the eyes, mild discomfort. Doomwakers are legendary monsters of the West that can be found anywhere with sand, though they may bring the sand with them under certain circumstances. Namely, Doomwakers are found within the true desert, where they are most well equipped for destruction. Visually, Doomwakers are large spheroid creatures that hover above the ground, roughly 12 feet top to bottom. In the center of their body rests a single, massive eye. This gives the Doomwakers horrible depth perception, therefore forcing it to use many tendrils along its underside to test the distance of objects as it moves. These tendrils hold olfactory, sensory, taste, and temperature detecting parts that make the Doomwaker capable of identifying almost any substance, be it airborne or purely upon touch. This most often is used by the creature to identify poisons in their prey or to detect their predators from great distances. Doomwakers earn their namesake from the ability to manipulate massive amounts of sand as a weapon. They earn this power from rampant consumption of graviturgy, meaning that many Doomwakers can be found near sites of power that produce graviturgy and seen hunting down schools of jeweled fish which they need to survive. Doomwakers, which I must stress are far different to Doomwalkers, are powerful creatures purely due to their arcane skill. Their abilities regarding gravity manipulation are not exclusive to only moving sand and creating storms. Doomwakers are perhaps most feared for their ability to do whatever they wish with creatures their size or smaller. The central eye of a Doomwaker holds a powerful arcane circle in its iris. This spell allows the Doomwaker to manipulate the gravity and push force of an object roughly 550 pounds or lighter. While it is possible to avoid being grappled by the magic through sheer willpower, it is a difficult feat not many can accomplish. This arcane circle has sparked many debates regarding the nature of many monsters within the West, with scholars worldwide being absolutely confuddled by how many seem to be artificially created, at least at one point. This arcane circle proves that, without a doubt, the old Empire of the West was extremely capable beyond reason. Mighty weapons, impossible spells, impregnable fortresses, all undone by something ancient and unknown. The sheer complexity of the circles beyond any previous belief of how magic circles even function at 100% possibility. Whereas previously magic circles were confined to a two-dimensional space such as a standard glyph drawing, the circle within the eye of a Doomwaker revealed that multiple layers of circles may be stacked and oriented over each other, stacking infinitely, at least theoretically. So far, this information has been deemed dangerous, becoming outlawed for the time being in order to properly research applications and dangers. I'll admit, our main concern seems to be that such powerful spells are what caused the calamity in the first place. There is a very real danger that faffing about with this technology could reawaken the apocalypse. Clearly, nowadays, we don't possess the knowledge to stop it again, so we must tread with caution. Returning to the topic at hand, Doomwakers have gotten quite the mixed reputation from adventurers, with some fearing them, others vilifying them, and even a few who idolize them. According to encounters, any one Doomwaker is liable to take any number of actions against a party in their path. The most common action taken by the monster is to simply go along its way. Doomwakers are incapable of consuming low magic flesh and may therefore only ever take an interest in mages or the like for cuisine. Still, Doomwakers remain largely uninterested in mortals, with only certain few individuals displaying aggressive signs. Scholars like myself believe that there is a much deeper sentience to Doomwakers, a level of thought that we, as of yet, cannot understand. It is possible that the creatures are afflicted with eldritch corruption, forcing them to see into the alleged other world that survivors of the things in the dark speak of, confusing the creatures and only making it seem as if they possess deeper motives than they really do. Or perhaps they really are simply intelligent, but not in the same way as us mortals. There's not a great way to explain such a concept, I admit. But for now, it's where I've placed my own cards. When in combat against a Doomwaker, counterspells and anti-magic such as silence are essential. Damaging the eye beyond recovery will remove the primary form of offense that the Doomwaker has, making the remainder of combat far easier and altogether stress-free as the creature attempts in vain to flee. While you may be injured, it's better to pursue and finish off the Doomwaker than to let it succumb to injury lest it mutate into a beholder. Dune-wakers are rare components in the food chain, preying themselves namely on jeweled fish, though powerful wakers may fell even Crozran destroyers. They are oft preyed upon by any monsters that can get the drop on them, or one that's brute strength is more than enough to push past the Dune-waker's defense. Namely, this includes Crozran destroyers, behemoths, and other such large fauna. In terms of intellect-based predation, a Vorpal Lancer may keep behind a Dunewaker until the last moment, and a foolish Dunewaker may accidentally trigger the snare of an inverter. I kind of have a cool image of my head in this thing that I wish we had somewhere. I'm really curious what exactly this looks like in Predwin's head, if it's like a proto-beholder and can become a beholder, which is its own very interesting idea. We've got that slightly grayed out link there, means that Predwin hasn't written the beholder entry yet, but this is part of the way there. So yeah, I'm curious what changes he will have to the beholder, because Predwin does a great job of creating his own monsters and modifying some classics. Also, Predwin, I realized I didn't pronounce rough as row. I apologize, but let it be known that I did remember at the end here. As for constructive criticism, this, like a lot of the stuff I bring up, could just use a once-over, read through it again. There's a couple, like, misspellings, a couple of, like, incorrect words in places, but that's like everyone does that. Not that generally useful, and I know that you're busy, so to output this many words in general is kind of a feat in of itself. I think the only thing that I felt was missing was maybe just a little bit more about interactions with other like people, because it sounds like there's been quite a bit actually, but we didn't get much on that. But that's why the constructive criticism is hard sometimes, because I feel like that's mostly just personal preference from me. I don't think that's a very objective statement about the work. So take it with as many grains of salt as you wish. Shrooms writes, Love in Brespa. Maldo Green, Clay Fortress, Western Brespa. Yamoa stood battered as the shadow of Asianaibo cast over her disgraced form. She had lost against the clan's matriarch. The fair Jom will forever be the property of Asianaibo. Asianaibo grabbed Yamoa's mandible with her strong claws before slamming her slender head into the mud wall. Outcast, for breaking the rules of engagement against your clan sisters. Outcast, for trying to elope with my concubine, my property. Outcast. Asinaibo's words were sharp, yet drawn out as if she had waited for her chance to throw out the unruly warrior. The warriors of the clan who circled around the two moved in to remove the outcast. Nyamoa's adornments were torn from her as the wounded woman was thrown out of the fortress. The sandy soil she landed on grated against her chitinous plates. Nyamoa looked back to the clay fortress. The familiar walls, once so calming, now loomed over her. The fortress was all she ever knew. The wildlands beyond were strange and alien. She crawled away from her home into the wild. Since she was a hatchling, she was always taught to fear what lay beyond the safety of the fortress, but now she had no choice but to leave. She shuffled across the grasslands before lying beneath the shade of an acacia tree on a hill. Nyamoa's eyes grew heavy and her body ached. Perhaps it would have been better to be killed than be outcast. Her eyes wandered towards the horizon, towards home. What pained her most was not being outcast to die. It was losing her one love. She gazed up to the tree before muttering, Hyom, this was your favorite tree. Perhaps dying here would be not so bad. Who said anything about dying here? Yamoa jumped up from the voice in the grass. She readied herself for another battle. Perhaps Asinaibo sent a warrior to finish the wounded outcast off. Her legs primed themselves to launch at the intruder before a familiar face came from the brush. Hyom! Yamoa pounced on the male as she pinned him beneath her. Why are you here? Her excitement could not be contained as Yom placed a hand on her snout. If you are outcast, I will also be. Yamoa's heart swelled at Yom's words. She opened her mandibles, placing the male's head within her mouth. Her tongue swirled along the face of her lover. After some time, she let go of her iron clasp, letting the frazzled Yom recollect himself. I will protect you, my sweet Akayanut, but I must rest. I am so tired. Her words slurred as Yamoa gently lay atop her lover, protecting him from the harsh winds. No matter how chilling the winds, her body warmed against Yom. Rest well, my love. For constructive criticism, there's definitely a lot of rough grammar in this one that I think I had to redo a lot of lines. So good to look over that stuff. I mean, clearly just needed an additional, like, closer edit more than anything. Wasn't expecting the tongue sequence, and I thought it was funny. I did actually think that was fun. It did feel like a little bit of a sudden smack in the face compared to all the other stuff that we've been reading, but not necessarily a bad thing. Not even really constructive criticism. Just the main note that I had in my head. Bubba 5000 writes, Seroth, the sixth champion, Nari. Trigger warning, vague depiction of rape. 2 years before the siege of Xanaheim, a Bestral girl named Nari was born to two parents of no grand station or nobility. Just two parents living a simple life, but it all changed when the Scourge attacked. Xanaheim in flames, Nari's parents rushed from the battlefield in hopes of survival for themselves and their daughter, but a particular roar stopped them dead in their tracks. Go! Keep our daughter safe! Nari's mother roared as her father ran, little Nari in his arms. The stalker took her mother's life that day. 16 years later, Nari was raised and taught to survive by her father. She didn't understand why. From her perspective, they were safe in their little settlement of refugees in the middle of nowhere. Oh, how wrong she was. The same roar of 16 years ago echoed as people ran for their lives, a shadow cast upon the small settlement. Go, Nari, run! Use what I taught you. Nari's father roared as the young Bestral ran. She saw the stalker in peripherals as he took her father's life. She wondered for what felt like weeks. Hungry, scared, alone, she used what she was taught, but it barely helped her survive. The cold of night and the fear the day brought wore her down piece by piece, and then she found it. The ancestral home of her people. The Twin Fang City, home nation of the Bestral people. She yelled in desperation to the guards as they looked down and saw the 5-foot-tall Siberian cat Bestral, cold and hungry, staring up at the armored guards. She didn't know what awaited behind the gates as they swung open. In time, she was approached by a towering man of her species, a grizzly Bestral named Azem, prince of her people. He brought her to his home, gave her food and drink at long last, and right as she thanked him, he unveiled his scheme. He proclaimed that she was his now, as his towering form loomed over the girl, and at first, things remained peaceful. The poor girl didn't know what he meant when he said she was his. How could she have? And at first things felt safe. But then, she remembers how it all felt, starting with that first night. The confusion, the panic, the feeling like she was being split open, the weight of his body feeling like he was going to crush her, the heat radiating off of him feeling smothering. She was taken to noble parties and left in another room with the wives of the other nobles as Azem and his gang laughed and drank in the other room. The silence was deafening. The empty looks leaving yet another mark on Nari's mind as she so desperately tried to hold herself together. That night scarred her like every other night Azem commanded his price. For 2 years she barely survived this hellish nightmare. Then one day she couldn't take it. She couldn't go through any more. So after another night of drinking, she waited for him to collapse and fall asleep, and when he did, she grabbed whatever resources she could and ran, using her small, agile physique to escape Twin Fang City and run far, far away. She lived for 2 more years alone, but this time it was different. The tight leather suit she made herself, clutching to her body, 2 machetes she stole, and a growing knack for theft. She would survive. But one day she found a camp in the middle of the night, 5 travelers asleep in their makeshift beds. Easy, she thought, as she crept ever closer. And right as she was about to open the Avia's bag, Nari felt the point of the crossbow bolt aimed at her temple. Don't move, of a pyro woman, Artem said while aiming her crossbow at Nari's head. The rest of the team woke up and they just talked. No aggression, no anger, no malice, just kindness. You want to travel with us? More the merrier, yeah? Said the towering Sidra woman, Byrith. She just tried to steal from them. Nari thought, slack-jawed, and they think she'll just trust them. We'll make sure you are fed. Any way we can help, we will. So, how about it? The young Sidra man, Xeris, said as he held out his hand for a handshake. She wasn't going to refuse security, but she just froze. She couldn't shake his hand. She could barely bring herself to even think about it. Sure, Nari blurted out, lowering her eyes, still unable to get herself to shake Xeris' hand. Nari was accepted into the team just like that. It confused her, confounded her, how she was just let in without a second thought. She followed along, confused. Orvis, the Avia mage, he noticed something. Her suit was so tight, he knew something was wrong. The Bistral don't wear clothes so tight. Clothing to their culture was either fashion or armor, he knew this. Every time he brought it up, Nari dodged the questions, as Orvis's curiosity was held back by Xeris. In time, the group found themselves exhausted and filthy. After traveling for days, Orvis guided them to a hot spring he read about as a boy, and there it was, pristine and untouched. Go on, guys, we need to discuss something, Xeris said as he walked away with Orvis and the mechanic Regda. Artem, Byreth, and the healer Zorn, and the young dragon Frapoko all lounged in the hot spring. Come on in, it feels great, Zorn said as she relaxed into the heat. Nari sheepishly took her suit off. She could feel her fur peel from her skin. She could feel how matted she was. Oh, holy shit. Dude, get in here, we're helping you scrub, Byreth said as Nari got into the hot spring. She tried to decline, but before she knew it, she was in the water and actively being scrubbed by the three women. By the end, Nari felt clean. Genuinely, completely clean. I don't know why you wear that, but you need to take better care of yourself, Byreth stated as she checked Nari for any other areas of matted fur. The young Bistral agreed as she relaxed with them. But then they all heard the three men coming to join them. I was wondering when they'd show up, Artem states as the three women hear a splash and see that Nari's gone, and she didn't take anything with her. With profanities said, Artem rushes out of the water, somehow the least bothered by her lack of clothes compared to the others. Artem finds Nari curled in a ball behind a tree, breathing and trembling in a way all too familiar to the young Vapira. Nari was having a panic attack. Artem slowly approached and got on the grass-covered ground next to her. Come here, Artem quietly said as she hugs Nari. And to them, it's like all the world goes quiet. Shh. It's okay. It's okay, Nari. But I'm right here. Artem gently holds Nari as she trembles, every muscle jerking under the serpent woman's hold, her heart pounding in her chest. Why? You don't have to say anything. But you don't have to say anything. Nari's stuttering is overwhelmed by crying as she continues to tremble. I'm right here. Just breathe. Artem whispers to Nari as she cries into her arms. In time, the terror and panic stops. Nari raises her head to see Zorn and Byreth there, dry and clothed. Byreth holds out a towel. So did myself, whenever I couldn't sleep. Thanks, Nari says, reaching for the towel but seeing Xeris, Orvis, and Rigda in peripherals. Nari jerks and hides in Artem's arm again. It's okay, Nari, look, Zorn says while leaning towards Nari before leaning back and letting the young woman see something she didn't expect. Xeris, Orvis, and Rigda, with their backs turned, eyes forward, away from Nari. What? Nari gets up and looks at the three men. What are you doing? Nari asks, confused, her fur still wet. We're curious, yes. Curious as to your behavior. But we all refuse to breach your trust. Whatever the reason is, we will hear it when you are ready, Orvis proclaims as they remain unmoving. Nari stands there in shocked silence, but fury begins to burn in her nerves. How dare they presume she'll believe them? She'd been fooled by a man's display of altruism before. Nari rushes to the three and stands in front of them, her wet fur not hiding the shape of her body, but she's left shocked. Their eyes are closed. True to his word, they do not look upon her. After a few minutes of drying and getting her suit back on, Nari looked at the team, all around her. Nari takes a deep breath and opens her mouth to speak. I need to tell you everything. No, you don't, Artem states firmly, as the others nod in agreement. But, Nari's cut off once more by Orvis. If you were ready to speak of your history, you wouldn't still be trembling like that, nor would your eyes still be glistening from tears. I know how horrible trying to talk about something painful while feeling like this is, Orvis says, Nari visibly easing. Don't have to rush yourself for us. We'll be ready for you. Just tell us how we can help, Orvis says, only to be surprised by a sudden hug as Nari cries into Orvis's chest. The rest of the team gathering around her for a group hug. Thank you, guys, Nari manages to say past her crying. From that moment on, Nari was determined to stay with the other champions because they were her family now. It's a touching story. I think my constructive criticism, though, would be that a lot of the emotional elements here come a little fast. Not necessarily that there needs to be more writing, but the temporal space feels insufficient to result in some of the actions and words that are stated between different individuals here. And it's hard to get super in the weeds because I don't really have the time to do that. Bowman, if you want me to really go over this, I can do that. I'll mark it up and stuff in Paint or something even. I'd be happy to do that much. But there's a little bit of it that just feels a bit incongruous with the seriousness of the subject matter. I can tell what you're going for, though, and it is very, heartfelt and warm. But there's some stuff in here that makes it not quite land, if that makes sense. But still, a great read. Actually, pretty well written prose-wise, I will say, would be the big boon here. Not too much slip-ups grammatically or spelling-wise in one of the longer works, which is great. So it wasn't too tough for me to read, which is always nice. And the dialogue is pretty solid. Well, that brings us to the end of World Hammer episode 16. Thank you so much for listening. Please rate us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And also, please consider subscribing to the YouTube channel if you're watching that there. The more people that we get to share all this wonderful writing with, the better. We will see you next time, and may your world never be lost in the fires of the forge of the World Hammer.